Version 3.0 is a London-based podcast brought to you by podcastldn.com. Check it out for some great podcasts. Also brought to you by the Free Association, which is a London-based improv group. Do some awesome shows. I've been to a few of them. Also, classes available. Check them out at thefreeassociation.co.uk.
Version 3.0.
Joining the conversation today we have Shaun Attwood. Shaun moved over to America, made his millions on the stock market. He became an ecstasy kingpin in Arizona and subsequently spent 6 years of his life in a maximum security prison. It was a great conversation we had with him today. Follow Shaun on Twitter at Shaun Attwood.
Actual statistic was brilliant, and at one point had more heroin users per square mile. Britain's quite small and there's a lot of population, so I think that's kind of how the stat.
In my little hometown, Widnes, they started giving heroin away for free.
Really?
To get people hooked?
No, what it was an experiment to give it to addicts for free because the cost of it through medicinally was minuscule compared to the black market price, so it didn't cost much to give it them and to see what would happen. And what happened was people stopped getting mugged, people's houses stopped getting breaking into, the shops stopped getting robbed, and disease wasn't getting spread. And the shopkeepers were so delighted, they put up money and demanded to keep it going. And it was about to get rolled out across the whole country.
Wow.
And what happened was the Americans found out, it was getting in the news, one call to Downing Street, and the whole thing was stopped. But it got picked up years later in Portugal.
It's so interesting, this whole idea of it is continuous, like the dogmatic approach to drug control, where that's why I say David Nutt I'm a massive fan of, and his book on drugs without the hot air. In fact, he just looks at like the risks of drugs altogether, and he's to say with heroin, actually the risk to the individual is still great, but it's actually the risk to society and the other impacts, which are the bad ones. So you can mitigate those.
There's a thing in Vice I read a while back about these fixing houses, I think they'd called them. I think that might have been some sort of Midlands-based thing, but these fixing houses, they said in 301 overdoses there was not one death.
Yeah.
And that was like their thing. They were saying like you go there, it's a clinical environment, you give them heroin, it's not frowned upon whatsoever. But yeah, there was overdoses and this did all happen, but it was just a safe place to kind of go and do it, and not one person died.
It makes the most sense to society because it's complete harm reduction. You're saving lives, and some of these people, they will actually recover from their addictions and go on to live normal lives, but otherwise they got catching deadly diseases and they're involved with gangsters and in this lifestyle where a lot of them just end up dead.
Yeah, like I went out, this is one thing, and probably jumping ahead a bit, but you do talks in schools. Like, do you feel you're able to take this stance in a school environment? Are they accommodating to that?
I just go in and tell them my story in the hope they won't do the stupid stuff I did. I scare the living daylights out of them with what happened to me. Yeah. And that is the overall message, and that's why the schools have me coming back. Now, in the last year, I've been researching the war on drugs, and kids have been saying to me, are you for the legalization of weed? And what I say is, yes, I am for the legalization of weed because I'm for a sensible drug policy. Yeah. People think if you're for the legalization of weed, you want everyone to go out and get blazed off their heads. I don't even smoke weed. I'm an advocate for young people not smoking weed because their brains are still developing. It can cause the most damage at that age. But presently, under drug laws, they get arrested, the kids, and here's what I saw in America. Most arrests are for weed. At the peak of the war on drugs, every minute someone was getting arrested for weed. And it was possession, 9 of them out of 10 was possession.
And what kind of sentence would you get if you had just weed?
I saw people get 5 years just for the roach
it's
in Arizona, which is since decriminalised. But then these kids go in the jail. They get introduced to heroin and crystal meth by the gang because the jail has got the hardest drugs in the world freely available. They make their criminal connections in the jail, and they get out and they're proper criminals.
Yeah.
This is what keeps all these prison businesses
Was that
going.
The case even in, say, you're in America's toughest jail? Yeah. There were freely available drugs. It was
more drugs in prison than anywhere on the face of the earth, and it's shooting up heroin, it's shooting up crystal meth. I just got letters from the prisoners this last month, and they say it's flooded with spice now as well. 90% of the guys were shooting up. 2/3 had hepatitis C.
I'm a bit shit with drugs. What spice?
I was just thinking that. I thought I'd act cool and not say anything about it.
It's one of these designer drugs that's been causing people to have hallucinations and do strange behaviour and stuff like that. That's why it's causing problems in the prisons.
Which is also like one of the big consequences of the war on drugs. Like by making certain drugs illegal, now there's this like ongoing synthesis sort of like battle of making new products that people don't know how safe they are. At least the other drugs aren't safe, but they're known entities, and now you've got people taking stuff where they have no idea what the short-term or long-term effects are.
Legal highs are a response to drugs being illegal, and Cameron has just made all the legal highs in the headlines illegal.
Yeah.
So now the chemists are synthesising the compounds to make hundreds more new legal highs in response to Cameron making those.
It's crazy.
It just goes round and round, and the young generation are these guinea pigs for these new substances.
Yeah, there's an amazing fact I heard a few years ago, which was when the methadone thing came around, and it was being sold as, was it plant fertilizer at the time, and it was, I guess, like an amphetamine type, ecstasy type drug, and there was a sort of, I think it was like a really Daily Mail led, but there's a couple of deaths in, where was it? It was Lincolnshire somewhere, like Grimsby or Lincoln. Right. And straight away they said they've been taking methadone, and they made the drug illegal before any research had been done. And they found out afterwards it was nothing to do with them taking it. They hadn't taken methadone. But with them making methadone illegal, there was a massive spike in the usage of cocaine and cocaine-related incidents. And it turns out methadone is bad, but it's nowhere near as bad for you as cocaine. So they're taking people who are taking one thing and pushed them actually into a sphere where they're taking something more dangerous and more at risk. And it's like, what has that war on drugs, that policy actually achieved?
It hasn't achieved anything except for massive profits for all the corporations who put the money up to get these laws introduced in the first place. Yeah. And Obama has kept weed as a Schedule 1 drug as harmful as heroin and more harmful than cocaine with no medicinal use whatsoever.
It's absolutely ridiculous, especially with this is what confuses me, when some states can independently say it's legal and some find medicinal benefits and actual legitimate medicinal benefits, and then still have a federal law which outlaws all those state laws. So even those people who are doing legal behaviour within their state, the FBI can just come in and shut them down and destroy them.
Because so many people have been busted with weed that parents are sick of their kids getting thrown in these jails, and at the state level, that's the people voting for those laws at the state level. So the federal government, is in conflict now with these state laws, but they have took a slightly more relaxed attitude towards it. But if you look at the incarceration figures under Bush, the Clintons, and then Obama, it's just gone up and up and up and up and up and up.
Have you seen in Derby recently, they released, I think it was about 3-4 months ago, Derby Police, the new chief of police just said, we got bigger shit to do than weed. Well, he didn't say shit to do. It was like an official statement. But he said basically
we got shit to do,
guys. Most badass commissioner in the world. But no, he just said possession, weed, as long as you're not doing it in our faces, we have got bigger fish to fry, and we aren't bothered about chasing you for that.
The police was started by Robert Peel out of London to stop people hurting each other. Yeah. And if you look how crime's been defined for millennia, rape, robbery, murder, and in the last century, it's become drug laws have caused the police just to have all their time taken up arresting non-violent drug offenders and hurting themselves. Yeah. And then throwing them in jails where they shoot up heroin and crystal meth all day long.
But there is that point where, and hopefully society's reaching it, but where do you stand and say, actually, this has failed? We've pumped so much money and resources into it.
It's so hard for them to just take a big step back on their word. When's that ever going to happen?
But there's a generation gap. There's the old school fuddy-duddies who say, you legalise everything, it's going to send a bad message to the kids, and it's the gateway drug, weed, and all this stuff that's been completely debunked and has no scientific basis.
It's only a gateway.
Versus the younger generations who understand what's really going on in the world because they're getting all this information off the internet, which is revealing what's really going on.
You know what, I think that's one of the worst parts as well, is because kids are going to experiment and find stuff out, and if you're giving this message that all drugs are just horrendously evil,
puts them all on one level, doesn't it?
Yeah, and so there are different levels, but you as a teenager, most people they'll smoke a bit of weed, and as soon as you've done that, you've you've just blown out all of that. You don't trust anything you've ever been told. Like if you get this like balanced view of actually these are the risks, these are the really horrendous ones, and you're gonna believe what you're
It's
told.
only dangerous. Like, but it's like where we live in Shadwell. Like these guys, the drug dealers, like they're all there, just young kids, like shifting stuff on the bikes and stuff. Like
Some of them have
do
business
you smoke
cards.
weed? Yeah, they give us business cards and shit. And it's like clearly, if the police wanted to catch a drug dealer, just go get a business card. You get them immediately. But the only thing is, like, they'll take you to. I've never been. I can't imagine anyone who would. You'd go into the dodgy estates near where we live, and like they're not just selling weed. Do you know what I mean? That's why it's a step-up drug. Because while you're there, it's like, oh, do you want some of this? Do you want this? Do you want that? It's like you go for the same place. Whereas, like, if you got your weed from a nice guy who would give you advice, like that's the thing with legalization. The main thing is the shamanistic side of it. Like, drugs used to be used under shamans, like in ancient time. Well, still do in South America and a lot of places. But a shaman's just a guide to say to you, don't eat all this, don't take all these. Is it your first time? Just take one. Like, that's the sort of process that keeps people safe. But because it's illegal, if you had the legal side of it, someone could say that to you.
And this is why kids in America are saying it's easier for them to get heroin than it is alcohol, because the drug gangs will sell it in the schools. But alcohol's legal and regulated by the government, and they can't get their hands on it.
They can't buy it. That's insane. Wow. So they just get heroin at school.
Might as well get the heroin. It's far easier to get.
That's mental. Just imagine, just like, oh, could you get me some alcohol? No, heroin. That's fine.
There's a lot to do with heroin right now since the Afghanistan production's just gone through the roof.
But you're completely right when you say if prisons are flooded with drugs. Like, if that's got to be a model. If you can't stop...
How can you stop?
Yeah,
into a country.
country.
You can't stop it in a super maximum security prison.
Yeah, and how does it, like, does it just get in through suppliers? Like my only experience of prison is Orange is the New Black. And they brought stuff in through like food suppliers in boxes. Is that it? Or is it all corruption at the, like,
Gets
top
in
level?
numerous ways. Staff can make a lot of money. Just takes a couple of staff members to flood the place. Guards are bringing it in where I was at. Nurse was bringing it in for the Mexican mafia.
Wow.
You said a nurse got arrested as well at one point.
Yeah, nurse did get arrested, bringing it in for the Mexican mafia. Yeah.
Wow.
Who's providing them with the money? Is it people on the outside are paying them to bring it in and then they sell it? Or is it people on the inside?
The gangs that control the prison population, they're in a massive drugs business inside and outside the prison. And all their day revolves around getting the drugs in and maintaining order. They don't want race riots. They don't want the jail locked down. They want everything order maintained so that drug business can keep running smoothly through the prison.
Wow.
Yeah.
I listened to a podcast with Rick Roll. Do you know Rick Roll? Is it Rick Roll?
Rick Ross.
Rick Ross.
Yeah,
Not Rick
in
Roll.
touch with him.
Who's Rick Roll?
Rick Roll's some voiceover artist for TV programs. But anyway.
Rick Ross, he was saying that, like, he was almost saying there's kind of like this. Obviously, it's real money, but there's almost like a point system when he was in prison, and it's kind of if you want the cafeteria to serve you a steak, for example, that money comes out of your kind of prison bank account, as it were, and then so you pay, like, I don't know, 50 quid for a steak, but then it comes out of somewhere, and you've almost got money in prisons to get the luxuries that you can get outside just by knowing people. That's what he was saying on the podcast.
That
anyway.
can work under some circumstances. Where I was at, they'd restricted that by saying you're only allowed to spend so much a week through your inmate store account. Now, so what you do then is a method called street to street, whereby if you're selling me a steak or if you're selling me some drugs in prison, and we're both prisoners, I'll contact my girlfriend on the streets, and she'll contact your girlfriend or crime partner on the streets, and then that transaction will be settled financially outside of the prison. That's street to street.
And is that for when you get out, or are you able to access that in?
In.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, so he's a prisoner in my building, and he's the drug dealer, and he'll sell me some crystal meth and some heroin, and I'll owe him $200. Yeah. I can only spend 20 on my inmate account, so I can't pay through the store. Yeah. So my girlfriend just gives his girlfriend cash outside of the jail.
Yeah.
That's street to street.
Obviously, you didn't get any heroin that you were buying while you were in there. Did you get any McDonald's, or did you miss anything that you wanted, like a milkshake? I don't know.
Oh my goodness! I got mouldy bread and green bologna.
What, you ordered it from outside? Bring me some mouldy bread and green bologna.
And the evening meal was Red Death. That's what the prisoners called it.
What's Red Death? Just like gruel.
There was a meat slop that sometimes had dead rats in it.
So was it harder? Would it be harder to get food to come into the prison than drugs?
Smuggling food.
Yeah.
You could get food through kitchen staff. So, for example, I would buy cheese off the kitchen staff and I'd stash it in my vent so the guards wouldn't find it. And that would
Just cheese slices.
Just bits of cheese. So you can get things through the kitchen staff. They have access.
So just to kind of take us back a little bit for some context. So you were in Widnes. When you were 21, you went over to America.
Yeah.
Yeah. Was that just you on your own or your whole family?
Just me. I'd gone as a kid. And from going from little northern towns to somewhere when the plane's landing, and you see all these swimming pools in the backyards and these palm trees and giant cacti, and when you get off the plane and the people hear your accent and they're like, "Oh, you're from England."
Yeah, exotic, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you're like, you think you're something, and then you see the roads and the cars and the houses, and it just goes to your head.
There's different stuff written everywhere, but it says you made $1 million on the stock market.
I was worth a couple of million at the peak of it during the dot-com bubble.
In itself, like, aside from what happens next, that's pretty crazy. Like, from my perspective.
Well, that was part of my effort from 14 years old in the stock market, my slow and steady progress. I made that, but because I made that stupid decision to go down the road of drugs, I lost absolutely everything.
You lost it all.
Whereas I wouldn't be worth, I'd probably about 10 million right now.
Yeah.
Fucking loading it up in
God, you're
Arizona.
laughing.
I'd be here in my limo instead of going to...
Would you not ever go back into kind of trading in the stock market?
You know
What
what?
are you going to say? Drug dealing?
Yes, I would.
To do that, I'd have to have capital.
Right.
I don't have any capital.
Well, we know how you can get capital.
No, but like, yeah, it's true though. Like, if you had spent, I didn't realise you'd started at 14. So 14 to 21, or whenever you made your $1 million, like that's a lot of investment from a small. When you
it
don't.
was in my mid to late 20s when I was making the big bucks. So it was a 10-year process from teenager.
And then you, so you used that money to obviously start up your ecstasy trade.
Yes.
And did all of it go into that? Oh,
No, it didn't.
No.
That started to become self-generating in money as well.
Yeah.
So what was the first big amount of cash you spent when you decided to go from stock market to let's make some money on ecstasy? Was it a big wad of cash that you spent?
No, everything happened very incrementally.
Okay.
I went from just buying my mates 20 pills on the weekends to buying them 50 to buying them 100, and then I was just giving them away, you know, just to all my friends, and we were taking multiple pills put up throughout the whole weekend, just keeping the party going. And then what happened was the local dealers didn't have enough.
Yeah.
So we're like, all right, what we're going to do about this? And then I found out they were getting them out of LA, did some background checks on who they were getting them from, got the guy's number, contacted him, and started buying them in the thousands, and then I saw the business potential of it, and my greed took over.
Can you remember what the single biggest purchase you made was?
Well, that was just LA. I mean, my LA dealers, you know, they were found out where they were getting them from. That was Holland. And as I was rising up the ranks, I sent people on fact-finding missions to Holland with the little testing kits. There was testing kits through a website called Dance Safe, which would tell you exactly how much MDMA was in the pill.
Yeah.
That's the problem these days with all these young people dying off the ecstasy. It's not real ecstasy. It's got these fake ingredients in it.
Yeah.
And that's because of the war on drugs, because they've clamped down on the real ingredients.
Yeah.
So the most pills I was getting out of Holland per smuggling shipment was 40 to 50,000 per shipment.
Because I watched the documentary and it seemed quite quickly that it went from you were just obviously buying these drugs from LA, and then it was like almost in the documentary it jumped from you buying them to now he's got 100 staff. How long?
They had 45 minutes to condense my life story, which is a trilogy.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed how they'd done it, but it caused some unnatural things. Some things look unnatural.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Like what you just pointed out.
No,
There's a lot left
But
out.
everything happened very slowly.
I think that's a
Yeah.
credit to how interesting your story is. As you say, there's parts in there which could be expanded to a full episode, and you just flip by in like
Independently.
2 or 3 minutes. It's like, whoa, what?
But like I was saying about going into this place in Shadwell, an area where I would feel massively intimidated. Like in that documentary, when it explained, I assume that was the first time when you went to the cocaine place.
Ecstasy dealer.
Yeah, the ecstasy dealer who had all the cokeheads there, and like there was a rocket launcher on top of the thing.
What he'd actually done in Banged Up Abroad had condensed 2 scenes. That ecstasy dealer
okay.
did not have those guys in his kitchen.
Oh right, okay.
No, they were separate. That was a separate scene from my life whereby one of my bouncers, it was a Mexican-American guy, I'd met him under some very unusual circumstances, and I'd helped him when he was trying to evade the police on a particular occasion. And he said, for helping me, I'm going to introduce you to my brothers. And it was his brothers. And I didn't even know who they were. And I went over there, and I go in. There's all these lowriders on the street. Go in the house. Brother answers. He's like, he's got his head shaved, in the wife beater, long pants to his knees. And I go through there, and he introduced me to his homies, and there's a big screen TV, and there's a little CCTV camera watching the street, and then on the TV there is the rocket propelled grenade launcher.
Wow.
Yeah.
But how old were you then?
I was in my mid-20s.
How does that not just make you piss your pants? Like, I would, honestly though, I did
crap myself. I did crap myself, but on the other hand as well, because when you're on the drugs, and you've seen Scarface and all these movies, and you're thinking you're the man and Mr. Cool Guy, and the drugs are telling you, this is fun, this is a buzz, this is cool, you're living in a movie. There's that side of it as well, which is quite dominant at the time.
Were you desensitized? Was it... Because I would imagine it wouldn't seem real.
I was desensitized to a lot of stuff, but going in that guy's house, every time I went in that guy's house, I crap myself. I could just tell about the energy in there. And later on, it was come on the news when they were all SWAT team rounded up. Murder for hire, New Mexican Mafia, most violent criminal organisation in Phoenix at that time. Murdering witnesses, police, tried to murder the head of the prison system, all this stuff.
And you had, because I read you had protection from the New Mexican Mafia.
From those guys, yes.
So they'd kind of just vouched for you, basically.
Well, people knew they were behind me, and that came about because the brother who I was working with before them, we were in a house, and it was mostly like in a student town called Tempe. And it was an apartment complex, actually, not a house. And there was a party going on, a lot of students, a lot of club people, smoking weed, on ecstasy. And, we were just kicking back in there, and the Mexican guy was in there, and this is where I first met him, and he was supplying some weed and some coke. I got talking to him, and a policeman just walks in. And he's like, I could smell weed outside. Nobody move. And he was about to call it in and get everyone busted.
Wow.
And then my mate, who I just met, G-Dog, he just whips out a gun, points at the cop, and says, the only one not leaving is you, mother.
Yeah.
And then everyone just ran off into the night.
Whoa.
Yeah, and then I got my mate's apartment, because we got a few apartments in that complex. And, we start to hear things going on, and we turn out the lights and stuff, and G-Dog, he jumps over the back and knocks on the French window, and we let him in, and he's like, the police are coming for me, just don't open the door if anyone knocks, because they don't have a warrant, they can't just come in, and he's like schooling us all this stuff.
Did you have anything in your place at the time?
Fully loaded with probably thousands of ecstasy pills and multiple other drugs as well in that apartment.
That must be at that point you're thinking, why are you coming to my place? Like, isn't you're bringing?
Yeah, there was an
element.
There was an element of that, but there was also an element of one of the reasons young people get into drugs, I think, is the buzz of the cat and mouse game with the police.
Yeah.
And it's us versus them, and we want to help him because we're against them.
Yeah.
And we don't want him to go down.
Like, that's all I could take from your story, say, like the sort of trilogy of the stock market, drug dealing, and then your secret blog when you're in prison.
Yeah.
Is that you must just be a big thrill seeker. Like, you're just looking for those opportunities to, you say, was that part of it? You say evading the police was part of the game.
Adrenaline junkie, addictive personality type, and that's what the therapist taught me about. And it was the therapist who helped me identify that and taught me also that it's all energy. And if I just channel energy into positive things now, I'm not going to end up, behind bars again. Yeah.
Like, when was the first time? Because when a guy pulled a gun out on a policeman, when was the first time you realised, like, I'm fully fucking in this world?
Yeah,
that sounds like...
Okay. That same apartment, a few weeks later, I had a wake-up call moment like what you just described.
Yeah.
Now, G-Dog, one of his mates, was this older Mexican guy with like silverish hair, slick back. Can't remember. I think his name was Alex.
G-Dog's much cooler.
It's not got a cool name like all these other guys. Let's change his name.
Yeah, that's cool. So I get a call on afternoon. I'm still working in the stock market at this point.
Wow.
And one of the guys who's selling ecstasy for me out of that apartment complex says, you need to come over here real quickly.
So you were doing both simultaneously? That's another thing on that documentary. It was just like you just sacked it in.
All condensed.
Wow, yeah.
So I go over there. I think something's bad. He can't talk about it on the phone. He was very stressed in his voice. I go over there. He answers the door. He's totally stressed out. His girlfriend's behind him crying. I'm thinking, oh no, someone's attacked his girlfriend or something like that. And then I start to hear this crackling noise, like zzz, and someone screaming, kind of. And I said to them, what's going on? And they're like, just looking like, just go in there. So I walk down this hall, and this crackling noise is getting louder. And there's a guy hog-tied, naked, and Alex is the older Mexican, and he's giving these instructions in Spanish, and there's about 6 Mexican guys in there, his workers, and they're torturing this guy on the floor with cattle prods.
Fuck.
Yeah, and I my guy in there says to me, look, this guy, he robbed your drugs, he robbed their drugs, and they got here first. As in the Mexican mafia.
That's what's crazy about this whole story is I was like, obviously I know it's condensed in the documentary, but I was watching that and I was like, there was so many times where in my head I was like, just step away now, just get out of there, man. Like he was almost just like he'd already seen this crazy stuff, and there must have been opportunities at some point. It was like, right, I've made. If I would have even made 50 grand, I would have been like, right, I'm out of here. I'm going back home.
You say that though. You say that.
Greed takes over.
And also, when you've been in that, right? Let's say you saw that happening in that room, and you said, "Fuck this, guys, I'm out of here." They wouldn't have let you leave, would they?
That's the thing, right? I wanted to leave right away. I shit myself more than the rocket propelled grenade launcher day. And I said,
got some good names for specific days.
Yeah. This is the cattle prod torture day.
Yeah, exactly.
Day 1.
And I was frozen on the spot, and I'm looking at Alex, and he's looking at me like, kind of welcome to the club kind of look on his face.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, I'm seeing something here that could be used against them. If they think I'm weak, I'm out in the desert. So I had to then just, try and act a little bit like I was okay in the situation, even though I was crapping my pants.
Yeah.
And I stayed for a little bit, just rapped with Alex. And I said, look, I've come over here from work, got to get back to work now. If you guys need any more help, I'll send, some of my wild men over or something like that, some of my friends over, blah, blah, blah. And then just got the hell out of there, just played along with them so that I was part of, so they wouldn't go against me.
I read a quote as well that said you were the Walter White of the ecstasy world. So, but his story is almost, I know it's fictional, but he kind of gets taken down this path of like, he just gets crazier and crazier and he can't step away.
I think the parallel is, he was in New Mexico, I was in Arizona. Adjacent states, so a lot of the same characters are in. Who he met were the exact same characters I was meeting in that southwestern area, but he took it to the next level where he started murdering people and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, but like, have you seen? I don't know if you watched it. It was a couple of weeks ago. That Darren Brown, the latest Darren Brown thing, where it was called Push. Have you heard about it? He basically convinced. Well, the whole process was set up, and it was in a day. Like, they'd obviously done some pre-tests on people to see how sort of susceptible they were to kind of going along with things. But they got invited to this event, and it happened within a few hours, as far as the TV show led you to believe. And they just kind of started with small things, like, will you just switch these things on these sausage rolls to make... It don't matter that they're not vegetarian, we'll just put vegetarian things in them. And it gradually scaled up to this point on the top of this roof where they'd accidentally killed this guy, and they thought he was dead, but he wasn't, and they tried to cover it up, and there was a few things that were in place. Got to the top of this roof, and this guy was sat there having a cigarette, and they were like, look, you've got to push him off, we've just got to end it now, it's on you to end it. And 3 out of 4 of the people pushed the fucking guy off the roof.
Wow.
Like, I lost faith in humanity. And the funny thing is, one of the guys that we know who performs at one of our venues was in it, and I said to him afterwards, he was one of the actors, and I said to him, like, you fucking made that guy. You made him push someone off a building. Like, that is so shit.
It doesn't surprise me because I've dwelled on experiments like Milgrams where they tell them to give the prisoners these electric shocks and stuff like that. And also this case in America where this sex pervert was calling up fast food restaurants, telling the staff that he was at police, and to apprehend a suspect in the restaurant, and then giving them instructions on how to strip search the suspect. And not only did the staff members strip search the suspect, it led to suspects actually getting raped by staff members.
What?
Yeah,
Crazy.
there's a movie about it. I just can't remember.
That is
crazy. At the start of this Darren Brown thing, the first sample they did show how susceptible people are to kind of just getting into this world once it happens, like, and you don't feel there's a way back. They did exactly that. They rang this restaurant and said to this guy, like, look, I'm a police officer. There's someone in there who's stolen a child. We need you to get the child away from the person. Follow my instructions. And they did this whole thing where they said, like, tell them there's a phone call at the bar and get her to come over. Keep the mobile phone so I can keep talking to you. So they got this woman to step away to the bar. And then he was like, right, now take the carriage, take the baby's pram and push it out the door and walk down the street. And it was her baby. He'd just stolen a stranger's baby just because some fucking guy with authority had told him that was the thing to do.
Conditioned belief system.
Yeah, it's crazy that you trust someone in authority. But the whole thing was like, it's so easy to get swept up in this thing that there isn't any going back. And if your back's against the wall, like the back against the wall method is like the most dangerous place anyone can be. And like obviously 3 out of 4 of these people pushed this guy to his death.
And I guess obviously that's one of the reasons you carried on in that track of going down
to my death by the Mexican mafia. Thank you very much.
Like, I don't know if with hindsight, these sort of parallels of, I guess, the kingpin drug dealer status has been sort of attached to you with Walter White comparisons and Scarface and those bits and pieces. At the time, did you feel that? Did you have the ego of I am one of those? And like, where did you see it heading? Did you see like an end game, or was it just this is going to get bigger and better? And
wasn't the stood on top of a staircase with a machine gun?
Well, if you watch Scarface, it's Cuban gangsters with chainsaws and all this kind of stuff. Which, you know, there was a lot of violence in the cocaine market. The ecstasy market, more of everyone just getting high and rubbing each other's shoulders and cuddle puddles and Vicks inhalers. It wasn't chainsaws. But saying that,
the business
as you rise up the business side of it, my competitor was Sammy the Bull Gravano, who was the underboss of the Gambinos, who'd murdered almost 24 people. And his son told me later in prison he'd been dispatched as the head of an armed crew to take me out from that club and take me out to the desert.
What was the bounty on you? Did you have a bounty on you? Because I can't remember what the figure was. Was it quite high? Or
there was another person that was offering money, tens of thousands, I think it was, to cut my head off and bring them my head. But the Gravano thing was... the son actually told me in prison that they would have tried to make money out of it, would have tried to like hold me hostage and get someone to pay a ransom, or just killed me to eliminate the competition.
But like when I look back at myself when I was 26, like I didn't have a grasp of really very much, and that was only 3 years ago. Do you know what I mean? Like you're in this fucking world every time, and this happens to me all the time. Like when I'm 18, I think I'm a fucking Don, and then I get to 21, I'm like, wow, you're a kid. And then like you think you're the Don then, and then you get to 25, you're like, you're still a kid. Like when you look back now, you were in a fucking crazy, crazy world at a very young age. Like that must like
prison. I was emotionally immature, and prison. It's like my maturity level stuck at the years when I started to take the drugs.
Right. Okay.
And it put a cloud in my head that scrambled my decision-making processes that I didn't know was going on. So I got into prison and sobered up, and then looked back and was like, holy shit, what have you just done for the last 10 years?
Gives you time to think, I guess. Like,
gives you time to think, and very humbling experience when you're running around with your ego as big as the Grand Canyon, because you go in these jails and you're just reduced to nothing. And if you try and talk smack with any of these big bad gang members, you know, they'll just shank you or rape you. So it's like...
I bet you found that quite difficult. Say someone who's like pushed those boundaries and tried to, they enjoy the cat and mouse chase with the police on the outside. Then as soon as you go into prison, it sounds like from everything I've heard and from your blog, you've got to toe the line. You know, you are part of that particular gang, and you do not stray from the rules that are set. And it's
in the beginning, that is the way. You're crapping it. You got to do everything that they say. You got to go all the meetings that they say, and you know you can't sit with the other races and all that kind of stuff because it's all racial stuff. But over time, you do learn to play around the guards' rules and the gang rules. So by the end of it, like one of my best friends, and there was a guy called T-Bone who was black. But
was he the guy you write in the blog who's like a protector guy?
Yeah, he's almost 6.5 foot, former Marine, trained to kill, and he is someone who was using his skills acquired as a US Marine to stop prison rape.
Which is
sounds like an
admirable.
80s tagline for like some kind of badass 80s film like
Dark Knight.
Yeah, how did he? What was he in for?
He got out of the Marines, set himself up as a bodyguard, invested into cocaine, got addicted, and now he's done 30 plus years, all revolving around drug activity.
Is he still there?
Yeah, he got out about 3 or 4 years ago, and I was on the phone with him every week trying to get his life story down as a book, because I hope that would give him credibility to do talks in America, which is what he wanted to do. But I knew he was in a race against time, because these jails don't give these guys anything to handle their addiction issues with.
No.
They allow it to be drug and gang infested, because each prisoner's $50,000 a year of taxpayers' money. So they want these guys to come right back. They're set up to fail. So he got out, and he did get back on the drugs, and that opened the door then for the police to set him up. And they really went to town. They tried to give him 200 years on a bogus robbery case. And they said to him, we'll give you less if you just sign guilt and get over to the prison system. And for a black man to say, no, I'm not going to sign guilt in Arizona, I'm going to take it to trial, is like unheard of.
Yeah.
You just
200. Where did they because you got a maximum 200-year sentence? Where does that even come from? Because surely when you get to 100 years, you just stop. Do you know what I mean?
What you've got to understand is the justice system is a business model.
Okay.
And the players in the justice system, if you've watched Making a Murderer, they're out to enhance their own careers and their paychecks and their promotions, and a lot of them aspire for political office. So if you're a prosecutor and you're a detective and you've got someone arrested, and that prosecutor can then get them a 200-year sentence and get in all the news headlines,
right?
That is a massive career advancement step for them.
This was the
That's why these sentences exist, not because people are going to serve 200 years.
And they just stack stuff on top of each other. That's how it works.
This was the most upsetting part one of the upsetting parts of your story I heard, where there was a glimmer of hope in the midst of your prison sentence, and it sounded like, was it, you might have reduced your sentence or something might have gone in your way, but it happened that during this court case your bail got increased from 750,000 to 1.5 million.
Every month there was a glimmer of hope, and then I would just get dashed on the rocks as soon as I went back to court.
And then did someone make an error on the 26 months and 26 years, or that's
My
another
sentence
reason?
was 9.5 years, comprised of 3 sentences, one of which was 26 months. And the prosecutor, I was fighting my case for the longest out of all my co-defendants, and the prosecutor pulled a number of dirty tactics on me throughout the remand period, 26 months. And the last one was to put that sentence down as 26 years. So I was fast-tracked to super maximum security with the most violent, dangerous prisoners, including death row.
So that's how you ended up in that particular
Super
prison?
Max, where my neighbour was a serial killer and my cellmate was a Satanist, and he had a satanic pentagram tattooed on his forehead. In for murder, part of a cult that was drinking blood and eating human body parts.
Did you make friends with his guys after a while?
Yeah, he was very nice to me. didn't really know what he was in for until my neighbours told me after he was took out of that cell, because I don't think he was supposed to be in with me, and got along great. He'd read a book about Leonardo da Vinci, and I quickly read it and discussed it with him. Didn't have any problems with him whatsoever.
Solid move there, for
Nice.
sure. But that's
Bonding
like you
through literature.
But you
were
were
a cannibal.
But you were saying the way that you were your way of getting through was like charm and knowledge and just like being able to kind of access that. So for you to do that as a thing, like that's survival instinct I wouldn't even think about.
But you know what? You say that, and once you're in an environment like that, the human ability to adapt comes out.
Right.
Now, I'm not a big, tough fighting guy. Look at the size of me, I'm just a skinny, nerdy business graduate. You know, if you guys were in there, you know, everything you think about in your everyday life that you've been thinking about all your life is out the window.
Yeah.
You know, what am I going to have to eat tonight? Who am I going to see? What am I going to do? All you're thinking is, who can hurt me and who can I make an alliance with? Because you're getting used to the sounds of heads getting bashed against toilets, bodies getting thrown around, blood getting splattered.
That can't be a sound you get used to. You know, just like, there goes another skull.
And I guess
you're in shock in the beginning, but you do get used to it after about 6 months.
And I guess one of the craziest things about it as well is, was there ever a point when you'd made alliances and you felt comfortable? Is it just because it was a constant churn of these maximum security kind of hardened people that obviously just changed the whole structure of the prison every single month?
Good
Was it just kind of like the hierarchy just constantly changed all the time?
The remand jail was a very transitory environment. mostly unsentenced prisoners, constantly people just coming in and out. I think your average stay there was in the weeks or the months. But once you go over to the prison system, where everyone's settled, it's far more stable, and you can make alliances with people who are probably going to be around for the foreseeable X number of years. And in my case, after I got attacked, I had a situation with a cellmate who was a serial home invader torturer, and his mate, a big biker, smashed me while I was going to visit with my mum and dad, a Christmas visit. They did it on purpose just to spoil the visit. After that, I got my new cellmate introduced me to a guy called Two Tonys, who was a mafia mass murderer who left the dead bodies of rivals from Arizona to Alaska, who was doing 141 years. And because he'd only murdered rival gangsters, he was at the top of the respect in the prison. And Two Tonys was looking for someone to write his life story. My cellmate had told him I was a writer. So he asked me to play him a game of chess, and at the end of it, he asked me why I beat him so quickly, and I said because he was speaking his mind all the way through it. You know, I thought he was daft speaking his mind, but it was actually he was playing me. This was all a big test of my character.
Yeah.
And at the end of it, he just said, "Look, to stay alive on the road of life, I've had to be a quick judge of people. Would you be willing to write my life story?" I said, "Yeah, I'd be honoured, you know." And I started to go into his cell every day. He had prisoners stationed outside watching for guards. And this was for months on end, and by the end of it, he said that was like the son that he'd never had.
Yeah. And you were saying that a lot of that was the first meeting of when you, because you played chess with him, and he was reading out.
Got me in his good graces.
That's amazing. Yeah. There's actually a podcast called Across the Board, where it's like people being interviewed, but while they're playing chess, and so it's quite like a disarming thing. I guess you kind of concentrating on one thing, and you just sort of can just chat away freely. It's quite
I am so shit at chess. That would be the worst podcast for me to ever be on. You wouldn't get shit out of me.
I don't even know the rules of chess.
Yeah, but that's crazy. So by you going into his cell every day, that essentially saved you from a lot of shit.
Potentially could have. I didn't get any teeth knocked out. I didn't get any bones broken. I consider myself really lucky getting what I did, and I credit that to alliances. I'm doing a YouTube video series now with some great young documentary makers called The Other Side Productions, and this series is all on prison survival advice.
Yeah.
So one of the ones is don't make alliances.
Yeah.
I'm telling the Two Tonys story.
Because your bouncer was in there as well, wasn't he?
Wildman was in the remand jail, so that was my first year or so. But once I got sentenced, he actually got sentenced about a year before me.
Is he still in prison or?
No, he's back in my hometown now, and he's doing really well. If you've read my book Party Time, you'll be aware that every house I put him in, he got set on fire or blown up or completely destroyed. And since he got back to the UK, he's got married, and his house so far, he's only smashed a door off the hinges, put a TV set through the window, and put holes in the walls.
Oh, so he's doing well.
It's just miraculous.
He lives up to the name.
Wildman. He's not been arrested at all.
Yeah, which
Doing
is
minor household damage.
This is the thing, though. Like the aftercare, you mentioned it. You touched on it earlier. Like a major problem with the prison system, and I don't know much about English prison system, but the aftercare is a real fucking problem because as soon as these people come out, they come out to absolutely nothing, with no hope, and after they've been in there such a long time, like there's no support network there to kind of bring people. Do they exist? Does that support network exist?
It costs more to send a prisoner, a UK prisoner, to a UK prison than it does to send a person to a private school.
Yeah,
and all that money's spent, and then they get out and just go back to drugs and come right back.
Because where else are they going to go? Like, what's kind of been set up for them while they're in there?
Unless they address the root causes of why people are taking drugs and help them get off the drugs, instead of it just being a drugs free for all. That it's never going to be solved, that problem.
What do you think the reason is? Why people so close to listening to the logic with that? Why is it just
people are close to listening to the logic of it because the media, all they report is crimes of extremity, paedophiles, serial killers, and how easy it is in prison, gourmet food, PlayStations, and that keeps the public hating on prisoners. And there's something deep-rooted in the human psyche that feels lock them up and throw away the key because they're doing all these heinous things. But when they get a call from their kid who's been busted for some club drugs in a prison saying, I'm going to get raped unless you get 10 grand to get me out of here, and this guy's got a shank and he's threatening me, that's when they wake up to really what's really going on in the world.
Yeah.
And this has become so prevalent in America, this mass, 2.5 million people in prison. It's become so prevalent. That's why the people at the state level have been voting in these laws to decriminalise. It's a backlash against that.
Like my uncle worked in police in drugs in the UK. From that perspective, from a policing perspective, I remember chatting to him. This was a few years ago. I was chatting to him about it, and he was pro legalization. He said it was the only answer. And for somebody who was front line of seeing that, he was like, "It's the only way that this is going to stop." And you've seen it now in Portugal. You mentioned Portugal earlier. Yeah. Like the fucking crime rates are down. Like income is up. It's like everything.
Closing prisons.
It's just
the police put the best argument for this forward. I'm talking about law enforcement against prohibition. And their videos are on YouTube, and they're excellent. And they say, look, we joined to put paedophiles and murderers and rapists and robbers off the streets. Not to have all our time taken up arresting non-violent drug offenders who are only hurting themselves.
Have you seen as well, in Leeds now, they've got the legal red light district. Right. It's an area of Leeds that they've just opened. They've trialled it for a few years, which kind of went under the radar. I didn't see any press about that. Yeah. But I think now they've just opened it up as like a full thing, and there's like a few square miles in Leeds now where between 7 p.m. and 7 a.m. it's legal. And like they've found that over the trial period, like there's a lot less sort of reported crimes, like a lot less death, everything's safer, it's all more, and it's the same in Amsterdam, obviously. It's been happening over there for years. But that's happening in Leeds now,
it's far safer for the women. I spoke at a school, and the school said to me, look, we had a girl in here a couple of years ago, and she got onto drugs, and she went to Liverpool, and she started prostituting to get money for drugs, and then she got killed by a serial killer.
God.
Wow. Yeah. And, you know, when it's pushed underground like that, the girls take risks and make themselves open to stuff like that happening then. It's really sad.
It just blew my mind. I mean, that, to me, was like a glimmer of hope that something that drastic that England has taken such a firm stance on. Yeah. All of a sudden, that's happening in Leeds.
Well, the drugs next.
It will be. It just takes someone to take the first. And I mean, Derby Police Constabulary, don't even know if that's a word. Him saying, like, we're not definitely that bothered about weed. That's like the first step. And all it takes is a few other people to be like, look, that's kind of going to go under our radar.
But my glimmer of hope was dashed recently with, Shaun, you'll see with the talk in government about legalisation of weed recently.
The parliamentary debate, the 2.5-hour one.
Yeah.
I've watched that.
I watched the full thing.
Yes, I watched the full thing.
And it's amazing where like Caroline Lucas and other people putting across some really, again, not saying it's safe, but saying prohibition doesn't work and this is why we need to bring it into the legal sphere. And some great arguments, and actually there's barely any counter-arguments, and then at the end, and I'm not sure the guy's name, the Tory MP, just stands up and says, I've listened to everything, I don't agree, and just chucks it out, that's it, it's over.
He did actually add that he felt that alcohol was less harmful than weed, even against all the scientific evidence, and he himself was a drinker, but he could not but stand the thought of people having marijuana and not being arrested. It just did not make any sense whatsoever.
This is the most frustrating thing that I can't believe isn't a bigger news piece, which was David Nutt when he was the drugs advisor to the Labour government, and he came forward.
That was pretty big when that happened, though, because he made sure he went out in a ball of flames.
That's true. He's still going on about
it
now.
He still goes on about it now, but he went out.
But yeah, he came forward and said that weed was safer than alcohol. And then got fired. But it's like, why have an independent drugs advisor who, if they don't toe
the line,
fight the line per hour.
All these studies, independent studies, have been forwarded to governments over the decades, and politicians know they get votes by being tough on crime and criminals, and by extension, people into the drugs market. But if you go back to why these laws were started in the very first place,
I know
it's got nothing to do with stopping people taking drugs.
Yeah.
It was to protect pharmaceuticals. Yeah. They didn't want people growing weed, free medicine in their own backyard. It was to protect plastics.
Have you read The Emperor Wears No Clothes? That
no,
book? It's a really interesting book, and it's about the making weed illegal, and it documents the whole process of like booming industries in America before this certain point. I think it was like early 1900s or something. Like these people paid their taxes in marijuana.
Yep.
So everyone, if you had land, you were forced to grow marijuana. And then it came a point with, like you said, the pharmaceutical industry, we had paper industry and cotton industry. And the only thing that was threatening all three of these booming industries was that hemp, because hemp came along with marijuana, even though it was totally fine. Hemp could make great paper, hemp cloth, like that was absolutely fine. And the medicinal purposes of marijuana. So that was challenging the three main industries. And then they just were like...
William Randolph Hearst.
Yes.
He was like the Rupert Murdoch of the day. He jumped on board with all his racism. And it was Andrew Mellon, the banker, who was Treasury Secretary of the State for the federal government, put his future son-in-law, Harry Anslinger, as one of the early drug czars. And this guy, he said things like, it's been authoritatively stated that cocaine is often the direct incentive to the crime of rape by the Negroes of the South and other regions. That was Dr. Hamilton Wright.
When was that?
That was in the early 1900s. Harry Anslinger was the guy who said, marijuana can arouse in blacks and Hispanics a state of menacing fury or homicidal attack. During this period, addicts have perpetrated some of the most bizarre and fantastic offences and sex crimes known to police annals.
Can you ever imagine a stoner just like going frantically attacking someone?
Well, he does change his tune on this decades later, but let me just finish this bit. Yeah. He testified to Congress that coloureds with big lips lure white women with jazz and marijuana. He said there are 100,000 total marijuana smokers in the US. Most are Negroes, Hispanics, Filipinos, and their entertainers. Their satanic music, jazz and swing, results from marijuana use. It causes white women to seek sexual relations with Negroes, entertainers, and any others. Jesus. He said reefer makes darkies think they're as good as white men. And the primary reason to outlaw marijuana is its effect on the degenerate races.
Wow. Like, that is just an all-out assault.
Yeah.
Just like we are...
The biggest thing that makes it an all-out assault is the just big lips. Why is that in there?
Yeah, why is it there? Is that an actual official document, like a quote?
This is the drug czar. This is the head of the drugs for the federal US government. This guy...
And when was that, sorry?
This is the early 1900s. He got the Marijuana Tax Act passed in 1937, which is the first federal legislation. Decades later, he takes it to the United Nations, tells every country in the world, you sign up for this, or America's not going to trade for you. That's why we have these drug laws in this country today from this guy.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Wow. And another thing they were putting out at this point in time was that if you shot a black man in the heart when he was on cocaine, he had superhuman strength and he wouldn't die. And the police got so scared, the police across America demanded higher caliber bullets to shoot black men in the heart to kill them when they were superhuman.
Tell you what, though, that propaganda still goes today, because I remember growing up, I was told that the only way to put down a guy on coke was to choke him unconscious. I still, honestly, still heard that. Like, if you ever got in a fight with a guy on cocaine, you have to choke him unconscious because he'll keep coming at you. And that's something that I got told as a kid. Like,
they got bigger caliber bullets then, and when the crack epidemic came, which was all hyped up in the media, it was exactly the same stuff as this, but in a modern day context. And that's when the police then upgraded their weapons to Glocks to shoot blacks on crack cocaine because they had superhuman strength.
But this is at least they're starting to address this now, aren't they? Where they're trying to look back at some of the sentences for crack cocaine, because it's like crack obviously being like prevalent in more the black societies in the States, where coke was maybe more. Not only, but businessmen and that side, I guess, predominantly white areas. And the sentencing for crack was like 10 times higher than that of coke.
What's happening is the politicians are trying to wave the backlash against the mass incarceration that they produced themselves in the first place. So you got people like Hillary Clinton, and Bill Clinton put more people in non-violent drug offenders in prison than his predecessor Bush and Reagan and Nixon. And Hillary's saying there's too many people in prison now. And Obama, he's done all these raids on medicinal marijuana dispensaries and upped the war on drugs and, put all these non-violent drug offenders in prison. And then at the end of his tenure, he's turned around and he's pardoned like 24 people or something like that.
This is interesting.
2.5 million people in prison. And he's pardoned a couple of dozen. They're good guys.
All fine now.
But just close Gitmo down while we're at it.
These states that are now legal, like, I don't know that... if you'll know the answer to this, but the states where, and Portugal as well, now that drugs have been decriminalised there, and like the states where weed's been decriminalised for medicinal purposes, these people who were already in prison for those sentences, are they written off, or do they stay in prison even though it's now legal? If anyone repeated their behaviour now...
Oh yeah, once they're in, and the private prisons and all the contractors and businesses are making money off it, they're putting money up to battle all this and to increase sentences constantly.
Which is, that in itself is just highlighting how fucking bullshit that whole process is.
Yeah.
If these guys, like Portugal as a wild example, everything's now decriminalised and there's people in there who are in prison on long sentences for selling drugs that is now totally legal to do.
Yeah.
There's people doing life sentences in America for small amounts of weed under 3 strikes law. In California, they tried to get 3 strikes law repealed because people were getting put in for stealing pizzas and stuff like that. Why should a taxpayer pay $50,000 a year for 25 years to life, which adds up into the millions, when someone stole a pizza?
Yeah.
And then when it went to get repealed, the people putting the money up to stop it getting repealed was the Prison Guards Union of California, who'd put the money up to get it introduced in the first place, and Broadcom, exclusive provider of telephone services to the California state prison system.
That's crazy.
This is a little off topic, but it just kind of shows like the investment and power of various unions. But you know, mixed martial arts, you know, the reason it's still illegal in New York is because the sort of the leisure union or someone that runs all the hotels and all these things in the casinos, they've kind of fought against it. So the only reason everyone because there's the money there to stop it becoming legal, like they just argue against it every time, and these unions carry so much power that it just never gets passed.
Yeah.
And this is a sport which is everywhere, but it's still not legal in New York. They still just can't get it legalized.
No, you're completely
over
right.
there.
It's like every industry. If you look at, I work in renewables, but with that, if you look at the amount of meetings that like renewable energy, yeah, the amount of meetings like oil and gas companies have, like direct access to the government, it's like it just far outweighs any access renewables or. You know,
These politicians, when they quit, they go and work for those companies. They're
Yeah.
all interchangeable.
Yeah.
Part of the same thing. Blame the Illuminati. MMA is illegal in prison too.
Yeah, I imagine.
Yeah.
What? But is boxing? No?
It's all illegal in prison because I ended up in a situation. I went to a kitchen work duty one day and I sat on a crate and a guy had murdered 2 people in prison said, "That's my seat." Now, if I got up, I'm a punk. I'm going to have a problem with everybody. If I stay there, I'm going to have respect from everybody, but I have a problem with one person.
I know the answer. You asked him to sit on your knee. Is that me? Am I right?
Why didn't I think of that? Sometimes you can use humour to diffuse a situation.
I'll be fine in prison.
If I'd have just said,
Sit on my knee.
"Why don't you sit on my knee?"
You wouldn't be sitting here right now.
What happened next would not have happened. That stressed me out, but didn't get to a worst case scenario.
What, you
So,
had a problem?
I stayed on the seat. I've got a problem with him then for the next several days. And I've got a friend called Iron Man who's an MMA guy. And he says, "Look, I'm going to need to train you in case this guy's coming with a shank and tries to kill you." I'm like, "Okay, I've got no choice. Let's do this." And he says, "Well, he's been shot in the leg. He's got a steel rod in his leg. This is how you do a snap kick in martial arts, and do a snap kick into his leg, and they'll go for his eyeballs, and then as you were talking,
balls and eyes,
chokeholds and stuff like that." And so he's teaching me all this stuff. Now there's a guard who's very known to be able to catch people brewing illegal alcohol called hooch. And we call this guard the Bloodhound because you can smell hooch from 100 yards away.
Wow.
So one day we were up in this little room doing this MMA, and the Bloodhound was on our trail. But we kind of
Were you drunk while you were doing it?
No.
You can actually buy hooch now in shops in the UK.
Really?
Yeah. It's just a lemon.
And he, just as he bust in, we could hear him, and we bust into some yoga position so he didn't catch us. But in the end,
That's funny.
Yeah, in the end,
Just practicing yoga.
In the end, the guy who had the issue with me, he was saying he was going to shank me and all this stuff, but he come in my room and he apologised and he said he was getting released. And if he'd killed me, he would have got another 25 years and he didn't want to do that. And it had a happy ending.
I'll tell you what, though, like, in terms of the shanking thing, like, I've done jiu-jitsu for quite a while now, with the ground stuff of MMA.
Yeah.
But I did some knife stuff at some point, like, just training style things.
Yeah.
And I did a situation where, like, because what it does is it gives you, like, this weird confidence. Like, if you have this training, because in jiu-jitsu, you do really commit to choking someone unconscious, and you have got their life in your hands. Like, if this wasn't in a situation like that, you could kill that person. So you have this weird confidence on the ground, and I did this knife thing, and he was like, "Right, take the knife off me." And I, like, grabbed him, I pulled him into my guard, like, which is a jiu-jitsu thing, and I ended up, gradually, I got him in a Kimura, which is a move where his arm goes behind his back,
Right.
and he dropped the knife.
Yeah.
And I was like, boom, drop the knife.
Yeah.
Like, got it. Looked up, because it was like black t-shirt and a chalk blade. Got up, and I was sliced to shit.
God, really?
Like, I would have been very badly cut up.
Yeah.
But me having that ego, like, you don't need that ego.
You
like
had that superhuman strength, didn't you?
Yeah.
The police would have needed a higher caliber bullet to shoot you in the heart.
But no, what I'm saying is you don't, like, having that sort of thing there, that defense mechanism, like, oh, it's all right, I can take this, I've got jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
That's not helpful.
I went into karate with that one night. I think I was having a bit of a manic episode, and I felt I had that superhuman strength, and I ended up with 2 broken fingers and a broken toe by the end of the night.
Yeah, it's not helpful a lot of the
I
time.
couldn't work out there for months.
See, I'm under no illusion. I'm a creature of flight.
Yeah, but I think I tell you what, that's not a bad
I can
thing.
move quickly and I'm agile. You know.
You'll sit on a knee really fast.
Well, that's not a bad thing. I think getting the fuck out of there. I mean, obviously in prison there's
Flight
only
on
so
me.
far you can go.
That's all I've got.
Did you ever, as well as the training, the MMA training, did you ever make your own shank or anything just to look after yourself?
I knew where the shanks were buried. I didn't put my fingerprints on the shanks. And I tried to turn it into the education opportunity of a lifetime. I tried to stay in my cell, reading and writing. I read over 1,000 books in just under 6 years. And before I got arrested, I thought I knew it all. And once I started reading, I was like, oh, you know nothing. There is so much in books to learn. And I went on this fantastic journey through literature.
Yeah.
And I read a lot of the original texts of philosophy and psychology, and it just blew my mind as to what was out there.
This is one of the most amazing things you've been involved in since you came out of prison, where you've been campaigning about books being allowed in prisons, or people being able to send books into prisons.
All the money from my book sales goes to get kids in state schools and prisoners free books. And the last 2 years now, I'm getting up to donating about 15,000 books to kids and prisoners.
That's amazing.
So I'm trying to balance my karma out.
But what is their argument for banning books being sent in?
It's part of a general hardline philosophy that's been adopted from America, which is the private prisons are feeding into, and the headlines that the media are putting out about PlayStations and gourmet food and how easy it is, we've got to make it tougher. It's just all about breaking the existing system down to bring in the private prisons as the solution. So that's just a symptom of that. He's saying, Chris Grayling was saying, it costs money to have security procedures, to search the packages and do all this kind of stuff, and vet books coming in and this kind of stuff. And he's trying to appeal to the tough on crime brigade and buy votes through that. But even right-wing people with common sense saw through that charade, and it got reversed.
I guess it's difficult for you to argue to an extent, given you, when you were writing your blog from prison, you were sneaking stuff out in documents and books. So it's
I mean, reading and writing was the lifeblood of my rehabilitation. And if prisoners are going to get out and be our neighbours, we want them behaving themselves and studying and getting educations. Because, you know, before I got arrested, I understood where the public come from, lock them up, throw away the key. I thought it was paedophiles and serial killers. But when I got in there and saw it's the biggest house of the mentally ill in America, a third of them couldn't read or write. It was mostly non-violent drug offenders, people with addiction issues. A lot of my mates in there were soldiers, ex-Marines, gone out to these wars, came back with trauma, got onto street drugs, ended up in prison because they didn't get any aftercare. People of colour, disproportionately arrested, 4 times more likely to be arrested for the same crime as a white person. And I heard the sad stories of how they were thrown away as kids, parents murdered, sexually abused as kids. And it opened my heart to understand this is society's most vulnerable people. It's not paedophiles, and they're a minority of the prison population.
How does this compare to England? Like,
it's the same all over the world because those drugs laws were exported by Harry Anslinger, and now prisons have become warehouses for drug offenders all over the world.
They can't be as bad UK prisons can't be as bad as the prisons you were in, though, in America, surely.
100 people have killed themselves in the UK prison system in the last year. Yeah, you're right. My situation was an extreme. But there's varying experiences for everybody. It depends what guards you run into, who your cellmates are. Anything can happen to you in these environments at all. It's not going to be at the extreme of what I described in Arizona, but, you know, people get killed, people get raped. That's pretty extreme.
But like you said, like, and you've said it, I read it in an interview you did where you said, and it's pretty reasonable. You treat people like animals, they behave like animals. And it's amazing how quickly that kind of escalates. And my only sort of drawing point on this is this sounds like absolute trivial bullshit compared to what you went through. But I was an extra in an episode of Casualty where we played prisoners, and we were in a cell block, and we were all kind of filed down these things. And anyway, the idea was we had to do a riot scene. Yeah. And all the cameramen went out for this one riot, and they set up cameras, and they just said, like, fun. You need to go fucking mental. And they said that once you've rioted for a few minutes, we're going to send a SWAT team through, shields and batons. They were kind of soft batons, but they still hurt. And they were like shields and batons, and they said, look, if they need to make this look real, so if you don't want to get involved, you need to go in a cell. They won't get you once they're in a cell. But if you want to get involved, just go at them. But they will hit you. Yeah. And everybody went fucking crazy. Like, unreal. The energy and atmosphere that was created. And I'm a really fucking mild-mannered guy. Yeah. But I got swept up in this shit. I was, like, throwing myself into riot shields. I was getting battered around. It was just this like, I don't know, this weird environment that just sucked everybody in. And like afterwards, after they called cut, they have to call cut like about 30 times. This woman had this megaphone. She was like, cut, everyone just cut. And everyone was going,
I've seen it. Well, one minute everyone's playing cards and watching TV. Next minute they're all trying to kill each other. They're doing ninja moves with mops and stuff.
I guess it's because that us and them mentality that they try and drive into as well. That there's the guards and then there's the prisoners.
There's us and them guards versus prisoners, and there's also gang rules of racial division, where each race is pitted against each race.
And how often were they just like? Obviously, I know you talked about there's the killing, like the general beatings that people had, but how often were they just massive uprisings of just chaos?
Okay, the gangs
did that happen often?
The gangs do not want massive uprisings of chaos because the prison gets locked down for days on end. No one can get out of their cells, and that stops the drug business.
Right.
That's why when you go in, you're schooled on the rules of fighting, whereby if you two guys have got an issue amongst each other and you start scrapping, other people aren't supposed to jump in on your sides.
Right.
Two people who have an issue are supposed to quietly go in the cell under the stairs, fight it out, and then squash the beef. And then you just have a smoke together and you get on with your life, and that's a normal part of jail business.
It's amazing, isn't it? Like, whatever can go on, it just can't disrupt business.
Can't disrupt the drug business, no. If anything threatens the drug business, that person's going to get annihilated by the gang members.
And you were saying that when people got attacked as well, they got specific tattoos. I know this is a bit of a weird question, but where do you get tattooed in prison?
People set up like a legal tattoo shop.
That's a good question, actually. I have no clue.
For example, you're allowed to buy a little radio Walkman thing, and the Walkman has a motor in it, and then they'll take the motor out, they'll get the outer casing of a pen, and they'll run some kind of metal through it like a guitar string, and the motor from the Walkman is here, and then they'll put a needle on the end of the pen, and as the motor goes like that, the needle goes like that.
That's crazy.
Prisoners have got.
And they hire a tattoo artist to come in and do that.
I'm joking. That's like mad ingenuity, though. Like,
that's it. They've got massive ingenuity, but they don't give the prisoners anything to channel their energy into that can make them constructive citizens.
Yeah.
Like, just that alone. If you gave me those items and said, make a fucking tattoo pen, I'd be out in no time. I wouldn't have a clue.
So much talent in prison, and it's completely wasted.
Yeah, that is insane. But there's working. Like, were you in a working prison?
What do you mean by that?
Where they put prisoners to work to create products for outside work.
No, I was not put in one of those.
But they do have those.
And I played the system to avoid work.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. So you could read?
So I could read.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
And how did you play it?
Because I was diagnosed with bipolar at my sentencing hearing, I got a mental health waiver.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
And you were able to read 1,000 books is...
Just over 1,000. I read 268 books in 2006, and I told my sister that, who's got a degree in classical literature, and she was like, you lucky bugger. People have jobs, lives, responsibilities.
And just going back a bit, how long were you in normality, normality, inverted commas, of when you gave up the ecstasy trade to going straight into prison? How was that?
See, the thing is, I was busted after I quit.
Yeah, that's what I mean. But how long were you retired as a kingpin?
Just over a year.
Wow.
And the woman I met, lovely woman, just talked me out of it, and settling down with her, but I couldn't quit my personal use. I was going off on the weekends with Wild Man, getting high, and that's how the police got me, was talking about personal use. Never caught me for doing anything else.
But they'd been following you for a long time.
They had 10 witness statements from over the years. So I was naive. I thought they got to catch you with 10,000 ecstasy pills.
Yeah.
But under the drug laws in Arizona, statute of limitations is 7 years. All it takes is someone from 7 years ago to say you sold them drugs. And that's it, they've got you.
But do you not think as well that, like, because when you finished the career as a kingpin, that network of people that were protecting you around you, that just kind of allowed the police to come in and bust you straight away? Did they not want to come in and get you it was just strange that they didn't come in and get you while you were at your height of your career, selling
That's
those
what
pills?
my lawyer said. They missed the boat. If they'd got us at the height of my career, I would not be here today.
Yeah,
really?
You are all in all quite lucky then.
If they'd have caught me with what I had, all those pills, for example, so if they'd have caught me out with like 40, 50,000 ecstasy pills, and all my mates running around dealing with all different other drugs and with all kinds of money, I would have been getting.
And
decades.
how does it work now that you admit to that and you've written that in a book?
Yeah.
Like, how come
statute of limitations worked against me because I thought I'd quit, but I didn't understand the statute of limitations. Right. But now it's working in my favour because it's over.
Right. Okay.
7 years.
So
is
you
over.
can talk about all that stuff.
Yeah.
Great.
But you only got busted for the possession, not the dealing.
The evidence they caught me was talking on the phone about personal use. That was enough for them to arrest me. But I actually pled guilty. Well, they charged me with running an ecstasy ring, conspiracy, all this stuff. And in the end, we pled it down to using an electronic device to do a drug transaction, money laundering, and another charge, which was something about me running a marijuana business, which I hadn't even done.
Wow.
But I pled guilty to running a marijuana business.
Even though you hadn't done it?
Because my lawyer said, out of all these charges, let's pick the ones that are the softest. And marijuana's the softest of all the drugs. Let's just go with that one.
How does
it's like Alice in Wonderland, the justice system?
What was their evidence for this non-existent?
I called the girl
crime?
and said, "Have you got the green drink?"
Wow.
And that was me. I wanted to have a drink of GHB, gamma hydroxybutyrate, to make for myself. And it had been tinted green, and that was it. As soon as I said green, that was it. The expert in street slang drug community. He said, "That's it, green marijuana business. He's running a marijuana business."
And I said this to you. I said this to you the other day. I was saying that it's not even the fact that when you got put in prison, you went from like a normal life to a prison life. It was like you went from living with a jacuzzi and this high end lifestyle.
God, yeah.
Obviously, I don't want to get people into thinking that being a drug dealer is awesome. But what was that time of your life like when you did have that party, when you did have the big mansion, you did have the jacuzzi and the swimming pool?
To the people who might misinterpret this, I had that house through money that was in the stock market.
Oh, right.
I was worth up to 2 million in the stock market at the peak of the dot-com bubble.
Yeah.
Probably worth 10 million right now. If I hadn't chose to deal drugs, by choosing to deal drugs, I lost that and everything.
Yeah.
So all the house and everything, they took that because they thought it was bought through the drugs, even though it actually wasn't.
I wasn't in that house by the time they arrested me, but they took everything at the time of my arrest. But under civil asset forfeiture laws in America, the police will target people who are stupid enough, like me, to be wealthy and committing crime, so they can liquidate them. Sure. Like, for example, my pension, everything was took, and I put myself in that position. I'm not whining about it. Even like if a kid gets pulled over in a parent's car and the kid's got some pot, the police get to keep that car, they sell it, and the proceeds go back to the police department in America.
Wow.
Billions and billions, and if they pull you over and you got cash on you, they take the cash, and it's the case of the state then versus the cash, and the cash has to prove in court that it is not being used in a drug transaction.
But to say, like, obviously you still had your job and wage slips and whatever, you could prove that some of that money came from genuine means.
Yeah, but it was irrelevant because I broke the law, and that was part of my punishment, and I was naive to the fact that they could take everything that you legally earn. So I had to accept my karma cheerfully.
Yeah.
Like, one thing that, like, because it said that also you were a fan of the rave scene, like, all drugs aside and selling the drugs. You were a fan of the rave scene, and you were hosting and creating raves, weren't you? That was like, obviously that was enabling you to sell product, but from
vertical integration, it's called.
But that as a person, like, when you, because I know from a small side of it where we've created a comedy venue, and when I see that venue full, that's a serious buzz and a really nice feeling that is addictive as well. To see all these people come to a thing that you've created must...
10,000 people with their arms in the air, buzzing and hugging you all night long and telling you you're the man and your drugs are wonderful.
That's an addictive thing as well as
the lifestyle
drugs.
Is more addictive than the money. The attention is more addictive than the drugs.
Yeah. And that's like, that in itself, aside from the selling part of it, that's an innocent sort of setting up the raves and things like that. Yeah, it's illegal to have underground raves, but that's like you're not causing... I guarantee no one died inside your raves, so I don't guarantee it. But
I was concerned about that, and the reason I sent people to Holland with these testing kits from Dance Safe to show we were buying 100, 125 milligrams of MDMA per pill. And there wasn't any of these ingredients that were killing people in it.
How many drug dealers do that? Do you know what I mean? How many people who are shipping this stuff make sure that their product is not going to harm anyone?
Well, the government would if they took it over, and then that would prevent all these people dying from all these toxic substances that criminal gangs are putting in the drugs.
But now, like you doing that, obviously it cost you money, I imagine, and it was also a very sort of courteous thing to do as a drug dealer to make sure that the people that bought from you weren't in any danger in that sense.
Well, nobody wants anyone to die. Maybe you could say it was courteous. You could also say it was self-interest, because if someone had died,
it
would have been all over for us as well, wouldn't it?
Correct me if I'm wrong, Sean, but was it was there a thing in the States where they made it like clubs, as the ecstasy scene started getting big in the States, and people started putting provisions in place to have like water and cool down areas.
Yeah, I remember that.
But they made it so clubs who were doing that were seen to condone drug use, so they couldn't put them in place anymore.
Well,
so
really?
they were actively having to not put any provisions there for people doing drugs, and that was leading to people dehydrating and
dying.
dying.
And all kinds. You brush things under the carpet, young people die. You have a rational, sensible drug policy, and you minimise the harm. People are always going to take drugs, and there's always going to be some harm around it.
Yeah.
But you've just got to minimise that harm.
Do you know what I find really interesting at the moment with the state that things are in? Especially with sort of now, firstly with weed, with the medicinal properties, and now with MDMA, like there's more research going into it now, but just the fact, and I think it was maybe you who told me this, where like it's so expensive to keep, to legally hold MDMA in this country, that the only reason that they did these Channel 4 TV shows was because the only people who could really warrant the cost of doing it was a huge TV production company. Right. So they got David Nutt on board and these people because the only people who were willing to stump up that cash was Channel 4.
Well, it wasn't actually getting David Nutt on board. It was David Nutt who was so frustrated at his inability
not been able to test
to do it. He said the only way he could do it was by getting backing from a TV show.
So program. People like those TV programs got a mixed sort of response, I think, in terms of like. Because the outcome wasn't necessarily... Because I watched them with shock, because I thought we were just going to watch another piece of anti-drug propaganda. I don't know if you saw them. Did you see the, like
where they had people getting high and they were interviewing them and stuff?
Yeah.
Like, was it that one?
Yeah, it was very kind of... Because there was moments, especially in the sort of adverts leading up to it, where I was like, this is just going to be another piece of anti-drug sort of propaganda. But it was a really kind of level-pegged sort of view on what it was, and the outcome of it was great. They had chief of police there saying, like, look... We know people are going to do it. All we're going to say is maybe don't smoke it, like maybe vaporize weed. And same with the MDMA one. It's like it's going to happen. So we're just going to say like do it safely. Maybe don't do it all the time. Like if you feel yourself having some negative effects, step away from it. And like it was a really kind of well-rounded view. And I think that was a marking point of the slight change of, like you say, it's the generation thing. Yeah. Like as our generation kind of comes up a little bit more, people are a little more like, we're not as close-minded to this. So although it seems like it's far away, it's probably not.
And if you look in the context of millennia, this last 100 years has just been an anomaly because people have done drugs forever.
Yeah.
So I think they're going to look back at this and think, God, what were they thinking?
What were they doing? Yeah.
They made drugs illegal. These things were worthless. Weed was growing at the sides of roads, and then it had this $billion value, and all these mafia came in and mass-produced it and flooded the entire world with drugs.
Yeah. Well, yeah, if it won, I mean, people would just be like, it'd just be like oregano, wouldn't it? Just be putting it in bolognese and just eating more spaghetti. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Things with weed, that is. It's just, it's crazy that it's created this. You know what I mean?
Cocaine is a plant. Heroin is a plant.
Yeah.
They are worthless. They only have value because it's a black market.
Yeah.
As soon as you make it legal, they're completely worthless again. That's how they were able to give the heroin away for free in my hometown, because procuring it medically, it doesn't cost hardly anything. To make an ecstasy pill costs, pennies? And I was selling them for $25, $30. My people at the raves selling $25, $30. because it was illegal and because it created that price.
How many people did you have working for you at like the height?
At the peak of it, it was a couple hundred people.
Did you think about getting into synthesizing it yourself?
I had a chemist who could make LSD and stuff like that. He would get his crystals from the Rainbow family. I had people who were asking me if I wanted to like make my own.
Who's the Rainbow family?
They supply pure LSD crystals out of San Francisco.
Oh, okay.
Going back to like Jerry Garcia and all that, the Grateful Dead, and it's all the big. They're like the hub of that. People were asking me if I wanted to put my own designs on the press of the ecstasy pills and stuff like that. But I thought if I did that, then I'd be easier to target.
Yeah,
it's an ego thing, then, isn't it? Let's name a pill after myself. I actually thought maybe I could put something about Sammy the Bull on the pill.
Really,
get the police to eliminate my competition.
Wow. But that bringing back to that Sammy the Bull, like you knew that you had a hit out on you, did you?
I knew that they wanted me out the game. Yeah, I did not know the extent of it until his son told me in prison. It almost got us from a nightclub one night. I had no idea that had happened until his son told me that.
And I wonder how many more times that had happened to you.
That's it, exactly.
Because who was your friend who was? Because obviously the documentary is a bit of fast forward of all them years. Your friend at the start, who was a stockbroker, did he come in it with you as well?
No,
he wasn't the guy who got his teeth knocked out.
No. My friend as a stockbroker, God bless him, he got addicted to meth, left the state in a hurry because he owed drug dealers money, and I never saw him again. He got arrested a couple of times. He was like crippled from a car crash he'd been in with the police, and he left the state after that. Yeah, and I didn't learn from that.
No.
Yeah.
All these warnings.
And as soon as you got out of prison, then, so you were just straight on a plane to England.
I guess you had to.
What was your first day like?
I was put on a
You're
plane
banned
to
for
England
life.
by the authorities.
Are you banned from anywhere else, or just America?
Yeah, most countries.
Most countries.
Yeah.
I can't imagine the feeling of stepping onto that plane must have been unbelievable. That must be a feeling that we'll never come close
and
to.
then the air hostess gave you some mouldy bread and green bologna. Like, fuck's sake.
Where's my garlic naan?
What was your first day out like then? Your first day obviously was on a plane flying home, but your actual full first day, what did you do?
It's funny because going out is almost as mentally destabilising as going in.
Yeah. Especially after that amount of time.
Yeah.
But at least, your parents were there, and like that's what we were saying. A lot of these people who do come out of prison and can't get back into society, they don't have that network of close family like you had.
I was blessed to have such good family support.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of UK citizens, like you pointed out, get deported back here, and they've been out of the country for so long they've got nobody here. And charities like Prisoners Abroad, which I really support, they help those guys have a shower and give them somewhere to stay and help them get jobs and housing and stuff like that. So I saw so many prisoners disowned by their family members because of their involvement in drugs, but my family stuck by me, visited me every year. And without that support, I don't know where I would be today, because they were the foundation for me then rebuilding my life.
It's really admirable what you do now, man, because having tasted wealth, whether it be from stock market or drug sales or whatever, to now come back here and have a book that sells well and just give that money for a cause that you believe, that's legitimately very admirable. Like, it's crazy. Good on you for doing that.
Have you got kids? Just as cool dad situation. My dad does this.
Yeah. Like that's a really crazy lifestyle. Like it's just a testament for how much you kind of believe in this. But do you feel been banned for life from America? Because a lot of what you do, the sheriff in the prison, like I've seen a lot about the way he ran things and things like that, and a lot of your sort of gripes with the prison system seem over in America, but you're kind of stuck over here. Is that a problem? Do you feel that you're kind of not able to do what you want to do, or you?
Well, when you go through something as intense as what the jail experience was, you feel bonded with those people for life.
Yeah.
And I promised them I would keep campaigning for them. And
you still give them a voice through your blog, don't you?
Give them a voice through my blog and through the books, and trying to get their individual life stories out as books as well.
Because is it two Tonys?
Two Tonys.
Is that book? Is that coming out next? Yeah,
that's next. Yeah.
Interestingly, can you sell your book in the States?
Yeah, you can get books on Amazon anywhere in the world.
Yeah. I just wondered if that's part of you being banned from the country.
My books are banned from the prison system. They're classified as a threat to the security of institutions by the Arizona Department of Corrections.
Wow. All right.
Yeah. But any normal person can get them.
Well, that is crazy. And in terms another thing, which I read your article in The Independent about sexuality in prisons.
Yeah.
That was something you wrote. The prison time was about that, was it? The sort
I
of.
tried to focus on it in prison time because I didn't want to just repeat all the gang stuff again.
Yeah.
Which is what is the most dominant thing.
Yeah.
And no one had ever written about the sex stuff that goes on in prisons before, as far as I'm still aware. So I thought that was something that would be really interesting to the public, because I went in there and I just thought, all right, you're in prison, you haven't got a girlfriend, that's it. Mm-hmm. But there's all kinds of things going on in prison. Sexually, it just blew my mind to find out what was going on.
After reading that article in your like saying how when you're in that situation, certain things aren't classed as being gay and things like that. Like I read an article elsewhere about like transgender, pre-op transgender, who was on Tinder. Yeah. And they'd joined it as an experiment, and they were writing about their sort of process. But they'd expected to receive this like large amount of backlash, like a lot of hate and stuff. Yeah. But they were shocked to say that when all judgment was taken out in something like Tinder, when there was no judgment there, people were open to just getting involved and doing it. There was no like, oh no, fuck that, I'm not doing that. But people were just completely open because there was no judgment kind of put on them. And I guess it's a similar situation inside. If no one's judging it, then...
When you go without physical contact for so long, the pressure builds up like Chinese water torture. And they told me I would be getting blowjobs after 5 years, because that's normal. Right. But I had a girl visiting me at the time, and that kept my focus on her.
Well, I went to university in Canada, and I was there pretty much just went by myself. Yeah. And my girlfriend didn't come for like, I don't know, maybe like 6-7 months at one point. And I was in a nightclub and I was dancing with this girl one night. I didn't kiss her or anything, but I was that close to her. Yeah. And I was near a girl that my knees were hurting because I was like that ramped up with testosterone. Do you know what I mean? And it's like I was like, I wasn't even in prison. Do you know what I mean? It was this case of, so I can't imagine that lack of physical contact can kind of make
World
it
War
crazy.
One, it was a big thing though, where people just craved, like you said, physical contact. Yeah. And people used to do things like it was completely non-homoerotic, but they used to like just cuddle and embrace and like just have that physical contact with another human, because it's something we actually desire as humanity, don't we? And if that's taken away from you, then you quite quickly become dead as a person.
Well, one of my transgender friends was melting plastic and making sex toys, and she had a beaded G-string. Right. Another one of my friends, Frankie, was one of the friskiest guys I ever met. He was a Mexican mafia hitman in for murder for hire. Right. And he'd beat that case because the witnesses disappeared. But he got popped for something else. And I remember once we were in lockdown, and the way you pass things from cell to cell in Supermax is by fishing lines. And what I mean by fishing lines is the prisoners get a little strip of cloth off a towel or a sheet or something, and then they'll attach like a toothpaste thing on it as a weight, and then they'll throw that out under the door, and the weight is out on the run. And then another prisoner a few cells down, he'll throw his weight out, so that weight's on the run, until the two weights cross and catch on each other.
Do you ever get intercepted by other ones trying to hook stuff?
Some people do mess around and try and intercept. They do and make jokes of that. And because he was so horny in this cell, he passed his fishing line out, and he crossed his fishing line with his neighbour's fishing line, and then he tied it to his dick. And then his neighbour was pulling the fishing line and jacking him off by pulling on the fishing line from the next cell.
Wow. And your transgender friend, because this was another thing that I didn't realise, was that post or pre-op?
Well, a bit of both, actually. Yeah, because Zena wakes up one morning, drinks a cup of coffee, no painkillers, and then decides to, well, he'd already decided to, starts to slash his man parts off.
While in prison?
In prison?
Yeah, yeah.
And what he did was... What would the security do? What would the guards do with that? Just take them to bed?
Let me explain a bit more what happened then. I'll describe the procedure. He drew a line on his scrotum and then got the razor blade and slashed the scrotum open by cutting down this line. The testicles are on two branches called the vas deferens, and then he hacked one of the testicles off the branch on one side.
Jesus Christ.
For what reason?
to stop the testosterone because he believes he's a woman trapped in a man's body. Wow. So then, where he's got it tied off to stop the blood...
Yeah, how much blood was there?
Well, here's what happens next.
Were you there, or...?
No. The left testicle then contracted into the body. It tried to hide.
Yeah, defence.
And then he put his hand inside his guts to try and fight. He said he could feel his intestine and stuff like that. He's looking for the other testicle. But where he's got it tied off to stop the blood comes undone.
Oh, my God.
This is when the problems begin now. Blood starts to...
I think the problems had begun a while back, mate.
As soon as that line was drawn, that's when the problem started.
He starts to get a hot pain and starts seeing these white flashes, but he's still feeling he's got to get this other testicle off. And blood is now spraying across the cell and hitting the wall and filling the cell up with blood.
Do you have a cellmate as well? Or would you be sober?
He'd put a blanket over his window so no one could see what he was doing. He passes out in a pool of blood, and he's got a helicopter just in time to get into hospital to save his life.
No, that's desperation.
Now, your question was about what he did after it, right?
No, I mean my question, the main one was like how people who are post-op are still in prison. They were still in the same prison system as.
Well, what he did was he actually he was on suicide watch and he waited a year and he got the other one off.
Clinically removed.
Just did it himself.
He did it himself again.
Did it go better?
He's fine now.
But did he manage to not bleed out?
Managed not to bleed out. And gets testosterone, gets estrogen smuggled in.
Mastered the process.
Wow.
Mastered the process?
Ball removal.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's called an orchiectomy.
But that is an
is-
interesting one. It's really topical at the moment with transgender and prison
Where did
separation.
they go?
But the idea of you're going through the process while in the institution is a difficult one. Like, at what point is the line? You know, it's like,
Arizona has no mercy. You're not going to go over to women's prison. You're going to stay. What you're born with, you are classified as.
That's it.
But in the UK, I believe, aren't they putting some post-op in the women's prisons now? Is that the case?
No, I don't know. That's
Or
what
is
I was
that, there's a
interested.
movement towards it, I think.
Yeah,
But one
that-
just had a really hard time and something happened badly, didn't it? to
Yeah, there was a
attend
horrible
the prison?
suicide recently.
Was it
with
suicide?
Yeah,
Yeah.
woman was
By
put
putting
into...
somebody in Arizona, by maintaining that law and putting somebody in there in an all-male testosterone-fueled prison with a vagina, that's just putting a lamb out to slaughter for sure, isn't it?
For some it is. I saw a transgender prisoner get sentenced in court and turn around and say, I can't wait to get to prison for all that sausage.
Well, I mean, if that's your...
Was that the first time they were going in? Or were they aware of what it was actually like?
They might have got a rude awakening. Wow, yeah. I mean, if that's your perspective, then maybe you're all right in there. But that's like, it just blows my mind a little
I
bit.
think
that's
that
still the
person might
case.
have been putting on a brave act, actually, because they do get brutalised.
Yeah.
In
Yeah,
general, unless they
imagine.
find a big, tough boyfriend really fast.
Yeah.
Which they would, I guess that if they're sensible, that would be a
Yeah,
first point
otherwise
of
they're going to
call.
get prostituted out and all kinds.
We said at the start, obviously, if you've got anything that you wanted to talk about, one of the first things you brought up is you're obviously helping the Avery family
The
on
reason
on making
Ryan's
a
mentioned
murderer.
this is because he's been so desperate to talk about this. He's saying it as if it's a
Thank
favour
goodness
to
for
you,
that.
but this
I was just-
guy
I was just
fucking really wants to talk about making a murderer.
Me too.
Yeah, let's go
Yeah.
for it. I mean, I've not seen it, so I'll ask some stupid questions.
You
Like,
can stay out of this one then.
I do. I need to watch it. Like everyone's been talking about it.
So firstly, the main part of what I've seen online, which has got a lot of buzz at the moment about your kind of view on making a murderer,
Yeah.
or had the most, I guess, you correct me if I'm wrong, the most hits on YouTube for the video is the video you did on the burns, because it was in the Mirror this past couple of weeks. The burns,
the
bone,
bones.
the burn burns. It's my Yorkshire accent.
Yeah.
But no, that's one of the main kind of bits of research that you've done.
What's the
Basic-
I'm going to preempt here, spoiler alert, because it's impossible to have this conversation without...
Well, everyone knows
it's
it's got a murder that takes place in Making a Murderer.
A lot of people, when they watched Making a Murderer, reacted at the injustice, and it broke their hearts and all this stuff. And I felt the same. It's still with me now. You know, I was moved emotionally for weeks, and it made me want to attack the special prosecutor Ken Kratz and attack the planting of the key and the DNA evidence and how the blood had been accessed from the previous case and could have been planted and all this stuff. But then I started to think about it more deeply. I thought, you know, maybe this is all a distraction. If we're all just attacking all this phony stuff, it's like a sideshow, like a freak show. there's nothing wrong with attacking that because it shows what baloney it was. But how do we solve what's actually happened here? And I think the blueprint is the bones, because the bones, it wasn't obvious to most of the viewers what the condition the bones were found in, and that they were found in 3 separate places. The majority of the bones was found in Stephen Avery's burn pit. There was some over by the Dassies, and then there was some up to half a mile away in a quarry. Mm-hmm. Now, the degree at which these bones had been damaged by heat was associated with a crematorium kind of level of heat. Right. And the prosecutor's case was Teresa Halbach was burnt on a bonfire outside of Stephen Avery's house by Stephen Avery, hence all these bones. So why would Stephen Avery, supposed to be this mastermind of clearing up DNA, burn a woman, leave the majority of the bones by his house,
and then get rid of the rest?
Yeah, there's some bones over here by the Dassies, and there's some bones up to half a mile away.
Yeah. And how hot does a bonfire get?
Well, that's what we
can't get hot enough to be.
We were saying it would have about to have 3 days worth of bonfires.
The whole neighbourhood up.
Yeah.
And one of the amazing parts was where was it one of Stephen Avery's relatives who said he'd seen the bonfire, and there were 11 or 12 feet high flames from this huge fire he'd had, and the defendant lawyer goes, "Well, you made your statement shortly after, weeks after the event. This." When we were in the court was obviously a year after the event, but given a statement a week or two after it actually happened, and said the flames were 1 or 2 feet high.
Yeah,
which
3
is
feet
amazing.
or less. The flames they tripled in size, basically.
Just fantastic.
Yeah, all that courtroom stuff by Special Prosecutor Ken Kratz was pure theatre. And I learnt as well, through the court process, I thought you just get up, and they figure out what you've done, but what happens is, it is a complete and utter theatre show.
Yeah.
My lawyer got up and said I was a saint, a day trader, goody two-shoes, all this stuff. Prosecutor got up and said I was the Antichrist. And at the end of the day, it's like whoever puts on the best performance wins. And the state has the most money, so they always put on the best performance. And that's what's happening in Making a Murderer. The state have got all this money. Yeah. And Ken Kratz sealed the deal when they interviewed Brendan Dassey, mentally impaired 16-year-old, for hours and hours and hours on end, told him basically with loaded questions what had happened.
I could barely watch that.
Yeah, they were just saying like...
And then they used snippets of that interview to go pre-trial and do a press conference and put out the most harrowing, gruesome things from that interview that happened to Teresa Halbach. She'd been raped. She'd had her throat slashed. She was still alive. She was dragged out. She was shot in the skull with a .22. And show Brendan Dassey confessing all this without showing how it had all been coerced.
Yeah.
And right there, that turned all the people who supported him completely against him.
Yeah. And what was amazing was this confession, which was just nonsense from Brendan.
Yes.
And but because that was then the basis of all their timeline, the events which had happened, meant in a way, Stephen Avery, I don't know if he did it or not. That's kind of it could have happened in a completely different way to what was set out. But it's funny that they just made this timeline based on nonsense, and then
got this guy to corroborate.
Yeah, so it's like, oh yeah, he's definitely shot in the garage and throat slit in the bedroom, but there was zero evidence to.
If someone got the throat cut in a bedroom on a mattress, there's no way you could clean that up. And if that's what the story they're going with, that someone died in that bedroom and he dragged her outside and there's blood everywhere, there's no way. Like, how do you even clean that stuff up? Like
with bleach, according to.
But the
house was because Brendan Dassey had the bleached jeans, therefore he's a mastermind at cleaning up DNA.
The house was still was still not in a good shape. It looked like he'd not tidied it for a couple.
Hadn't tidied it forever, and there was deer blood found.
Yeah,
right. And then the bullet as well. There's bullets all over the place, and they chose a crushed bullet. Because a bullet has a fingerprint on it, it's the striations, but a crushed bullet doesn't have the fingerprint on it. So you can't tell where it's come from. So let's just use that bullet as the murder bullet.
Yeah.
So now
you can't prove otherwise.
So now this has come out. Were you aware of this before the TV program?
I was aware of this situations like this happening all across America because people think this is an isolated thing and it's not.
No. Yeah.
I wasn't aware specifically of the case until I watched.
And then since that, you've then kind of got in touch with the family and.
Because I've been in the prison system and the judicial system, and I knew what these guys were going through in terms of family members and friends trying to visit them, trying to send them things through the inmate commissary, which has complicated procedures, and even how to write a letter to these guys. You can't just like send them something, a package, and mail it to the prison and think they're going to have that and they're going to benefit from it. They're not. There's all these rules and procedures you must follow. Right. So right away, having learned all this myself the hard way, I thought if I go on YouTube, put out some videos explaining how people can write to them, can send them money, can buy them things through the inmate store, because I knew there was going to be an avalanche of support. People will be able to do it correctly, and these guys will benefit from that.
Wow, that's really clever. And so you're now kind of campaigning blanket against his incarceration.
Well, I'm part of the online research team of all these people all over the world just doing putting their lives on.
It's like a hive mind, isn't it? Just a hive mind of the world, just kind of, and that's the best way for things to. I remember, and this is totally opposite, but there was a science company that basically just opened something up to the world, and there's certain other, like I think Tesla has laid out his plans to the world and said like, someone just do something with this, and that's like opening up a hive mind to that level is just the greatest thing anyone can. It is
because we're all building on each other's research, and people are noticing different angles, and when you've got that many minds on the case, it's amazing how it's just progressing. And he's got this new lawyer now, and the Innocence Project are back on board. And it's looking really positive.
How does that look? How do you stand? Do you feel you want to find out what really happened? Or are you convinced he's innocent?
I think the priority is to get Stephen Avery and Brendan Dassey released by whatever means possible.
Yeah.
You know, secondary, there's a killer still out there?
Yeah.
You know, there's possibly more victims. Like in the early case, there was another rape victim, wasn't there? Because they set Stephen up. So we're going to see that again in this situation, or it may have already happened. But whatever means possible, and the two ways that he's supposed to be able to get out through the legal system is if there's new evidence or if there's an advance in technology that shows that he's innocent.
Yeah.
But there's also the fact that...
Which is the I guess it's the EDTA and the planted blood. Is that the only way? Because I guess they're saying that if you remove blood from a vial, which happened, there's no way of still monitoring if that blood was from a vial or if it was just actual blood. But that would be the advancement.
The EDTA test is completely bogus.
Yeah,
it has no scientific basis, and I can't believe they even allowed that to be admissible. It just shows how the whole court system, that judge, was just part of the conspiracy to put this guy away. Now, other things that I've come across in my research is that the sheriff, Herman, runs the big auto salvage yard in competition with the Averys.
Wow.
So as soon as Avery's name got trashed, Avery's yard was the go-to yard.
Yeah.
Wow.
His business is now booming because he's become a go-to yard for the salvage business.
And it comes down to something that trivial.
Yeah, and he has access to tow trucks, access to smelters with high levels of heat.
Fuck.
Possibly her vehicle was towed onto the Avery lot.
And is this well known? This information? I've not seen the program. Does this come
out?
It's not. It's not mentioned, which is crazy.
We're about to put out a video on this with my documentary guys, The Other Side Productions, detailing the extent of Herman's involvement in benefiting from the demise of the fall of the Avery name.
Fuck.
Yeah.
Look forward to that for sure.
Yeah.
Well, they're making a second series now, aren't they? It's been confirmed.
Saw that, yeah.
Yeah. You know, they're supposedly creating a second series from Making a Murderer 2.
Every day without fail. I do need to watch it. I just need to sit down and watch it. But I'm a fucking binge watcher. So like, I will smash that shit in like a day. But like I see it every day on social media, like without fail.
It's been trending for weeks, and it is so highly binge watchable.
I've never had anything quite so bad. That week I achieved nothing. Like it was like I came home from work, I just had to sit and watch episode after episode.
Did you feel sick?
Yeah.
You get your hopes up 1 minute, and you see his mum in there in the courtroom, and you're like, God bless her, and your heart's bleeding for her.
Yeah.
And next minute, it's Kratz up there doing something snidey and sneaky, and Fassbender and Weigarter coercing Brendan more, and it's like, oh, you want to throttle these guys?
Yeah, to have yourself in that position as well, for you to actively, because you've obviously got a following on YouTube, you've got an audience that you can kind of say this to. You've got people who listen, and I think that's a really kind of advantageous position, and to especially if you're releasing this new sort of information that you found out like that.
Well, I was stupid enough to put myself in prison. I wasn't innocent, but for someone in there to be innocent and serve 28 years now,
Yeah.
You know, you got to be mentally ill after that point in time. 28 years, something you didn't do. Can't imagine his psychological condition at this stage, and I only hope that all this support is really boosting his spirits and giving him the will to go on. Because there was a point in time where remember where he said, "I'm just going to end it, Mum."
Yeah.
And she's like, "Don't be stupid. Don't be stupid."
Yeah.
I'm just going to end it. I can't go anymore. I can't go anymore.
This is a thing though, like I'm like, I like to think of myself as a strong person, but when you feel like I said, the back against the wall thing, if you feel that you aren't getting out and you feel that the world's against you, then what are your options, man? Like, really?
Yeah.
Like, if you're in that hellhole, and if you, because he did get out, didn't he, at one point, and then he went back in.
He got out and he was about
That's
to get up to $36 million.
Compensation, and then he went back in.
Yeah, and then the very police who had been deposed in this lawsuit are the ones who suddenly find the magical key.
Yeah.
So the ones who actually call in Teresa Halbach's car. They stood there looking at it, calling it in 2 days before it's actually found. And he lies on the stand and said, "I couldn't have possibly called it in. The dispatcher must have said that," and they played the call back, and he's calling it in.
It is crazy. It's
But
crazy.
that perspective, though, from him, if he's got out once, then gone straight back in, like, regardless of all this support and things, like, in his brain, it must be so hard to just not think that you're spending the rest of your life in there. Like, if he got out again, he must be in the back of his mind.
He deals with it pretty well, though. Like, he just... I know he looks, obviously, when that decision comes in on the second time, when he gets put down, that's the only time you really see his head drop in the documentary. But because it's just the way he is, it just looks like he's just running through the motions, like, yep, it's happened again, and it's kind of... It almost seems like he's being honest, just because he's just like, well, this is shit. You know what I mean? It's kind of...
Yeah, but the suicide, if he said that he's thinking of ending it all, like, that's...
Well, the other thing is
the best thing that he could do, I guess, for the police, is for everyone who's
Oh,
involved.
they would win if he killed himself.
that would be the best case scenario for them.
The other thing is, as well, all this research collectively all over the world now has produced a suspect list.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so there's all these alternative suspects.
One of them's
And
the guy,
would they,
Black Dahlia guy.
when are they forced to pay sort of dues to this? When are they?
The
at
lawyer,
what point do they have to
the
look at
female
this?
lawyer, has been very proactive and vocal on Twitter. I think Zella is the name, something like that, and she is looking at all this information coming in.
Okay.
Yeah, she said she's looking in particular at Ed Edwards, the serial killer.
Right.
Is he the guy who's black? Is it the black? How do you pronounce it? The Black Dahlia? How do you pronounce
Black
that?
Dahlia?
Black Dahlia. Because I read something about him that he lived 50 miles away or something like
Right.
that.
I'm not sure. This is the Zodiac killer, Ed Edwards, and he was famous for getting involved in high-profile situations, setting people up, planting evidence.
Wow.
And he was so successful at this. He even had one guy who wasn't the murderer get executed and ended up with the death penalty and got executed. So someone he'd murdered he'd set this guy up to take the fall for the murder. That guy then got executed.
So the hang on, the evidence was so compelling that they give him, because you have to be without a doubt for the death penalty. Is that right? It has to be like
in
DNA.
America, in this Alice in Wonderland justice system,
They just dish it out.
the DNA evidence now has proven, hundreds of people are innocent, including people on death row. And before this DNA evidence, imagine how many people are going to death row and getting executed.
I saw your thing, that discussion about the death penalty. I don't know how old that was, but the guy who was fighting the case for it was just fucking stupid. Like, I'd take your stance entirely on it.
What was this?
Just that you were arguing. I can't remember who the guy was that you were arguing
Ray
with.
Crone,
Yeah.
the Snaggletooth killer.
Yeah.
My lawyer, Alan Simpson, got involved in this case. Ray Crone. Waitress is found dead near a bar. Ray was been at the bar. Well, let's arrest Ray. There's DNA on her. There's a bite mark on her. Doesn't match. Well, what the hell? Let's just suppress the DNA and let's just pay an expert witness $50,000 to say the bite matches. So they got the expert witness up. Says it matches. DNA suppressed. They give Ray $5,000, $10,000 to defend himself and a public defender like Len Kaczynski. And they spend the vast resources of the state putting on this theatre show to say that he's guilty. And, of course, they win.
Yeah.
And then his mum also has a heart attack in the courtroom. And for 10 years he's on death row. He's within hours of getting executed multiple times. And then my lawyer got involved, Alan Simpson.
At least he got a load of nice food every time, wouldn't he? Did he get his last meal over and over again?
Yeah.
How far did he take it? Like, there's your last meal. In fact, we changed our mind, just quickly eating it.
But that guy, like, how how do you pay a witness?
I'll get to that in a second. Let me just conclude what happened to him. Well, a lawyer sued the state of Arizona to release the DNA. These states don't want to release the DNA. They don't want the cases to unravel. He ran it through a crime lab. It matched someone who was in the system, in the prison system. That person confessed to the murder. It could have been solved as easily as that.
What's the benefit of doing the other process?
Because if someone's murdered, and you're a detective and a prosecutor, and you can get a murder conviction solved very quickly.
It all boils down to the same thing.
If you look at the hierarchy
Yeah.
of criminal cases, your career advancement comes from solving a murder, not from the low-level drug dealer.
But I guess it's not from solving it. See, it comes from you prosecuting someone for that crime, or
your conviction rate,
yeah,
and your sentence length determine your career trajectory.
Regardless of if it's right or wrong, you just need to get someone.
It doesn't matter who it is.
Yeah.
As long as you got your conviction and you got your big sentence, and the death sentence is the biggest sentence you can get, your career is then assured.
Yeah.
Look at Making a Murderer.
Insane.
Ken Kratz. He won a prize. He was heralded for convicting Brendan Dassey, a mentally challenged 16-year-old, and Stephen Avery. He won a prize for it.
Yeah.
He was a hero of that just judicial community.
Does it work the other way? Do people get accredited for getting people off in high-profile cases, or is it officially is your career-defining moment the people that you
the heroes, the people who come in like Dean Strang and these lawyers, Buting, they get accolades from the human rights people.
Wow.
But they're enemies of the local judicial system.
And what happens when this comes out? Like your Snaggletooth Killer.
Yeah.
Ray
Schramm, the Snaggletooth Killer, didn't even get an apology.
That's really
didn't even get an apology. He got money.
Okay.
He was lucky. A lot of them they won't even give them money. And what he does now is he's part of helping prisoners get the DNA test who are on death row to prison. It costs $200 to get a DNA test, and these states all over America will not pay for the DNA test because they know.
As you say,
these guys are going to get out and
actively suppressing.
We have to pay compensation.
Like that's just how is that in a legal system? Just
money,
openly illegal behaviour in a legal system, and people know about it. And if it's documented and there's fact, and it's come down to people getting out and other people admitting to murdering people, like that's hard facts. If you held that person in a court of law accountable for what they've done with that evidence, they'd go to prison. So why don't they? Why aren't these people in a court of law with this evidence against them?
If that's happened, and money is the overriding thing. And in Stephen Avery's case, 36 million was at stake.
That's
are there any kind of occasions in the UK that anything like this has happened before that you've kind of looked into, or you've monitored, or you've seen?
People I've spoke to, it doesn't go to the extreme of corruption as in America, but the corruption does exist. Yeah.
I think there's a crazy underworld to the UK which I'm totally oblivious to, and I've realised the more I've read, especially just sort of reading about your sort of stuff and reading about prison systems, drug offences in the UK, and I've opened up a whole underworld of London, particularly that I was kind of knew existed, but I wasn't that aware. I just float around in this bubble that this is our life. But
big cities have the biggest underworld.
Just down the road. And when you said it, the Liverpool Mafia at the very top, I was like, what the fuck? Liverpool have a mafia? Honestly, it doesn't even occur to me.
Cartel, they get along well with the Cali Cartel. Did you watch the series on Pablo Escobar?
No, I haven't seen that yet.
Is that Narcos? Is that what it's called? Yeah, I've had that recommended. That is on my list actually to watch.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
For sure. When's the series going to get made about your life?
Whenever they come along and
man, it needs to happen. We get three series at least.
Thank you.
And then franchise it to America, and they'll just keep telling your story.
You could get involved in a lot of dodgy stuff quite quickly if you wanted to. We were saying the other day that we cleared Mark's great aunt's house, and while we were in there, because she just didn't have any relatives, was it in Leytonstone?
Yeah, it's outside
something in
London.
Leytonstone, and we found a gun, like a handgun, in one of the drawers there. And it was wrapped in a cloth, and obviously back then we were kind of we got told that a lot of older ladies had guns because during the Second World War they were paranoid that Germans might invade the house and they needed protection. But we found this gun. We called the police. The police just said, they basically said, leave the door open.
Oh, no, they said, we'll be there in a few hours. Didn't come. Rang them again. We'll be, we're just round the corner. We'll be there in a few hours. Didn't come. We were like, look, we're going. We're leaving this house. We're not back for a week. The next person someone's going to be in this house is a week's time.
But
they were like, oh, just leave the door open. We'll go upstairs and get it and shut the door behind us.
But if you didn't call the police and went the other direction and said, we found a gun, anyone want to buy a gun? You could sell that to someone dodgy within 30 minutes. Do you know what I mean? It's
why would the police want to come and pick up a gun when they're out arresting kids smoking weed? And that's what they get.
And
we get extra money to arrest.
We left the door open to this house. We left it unlocked. And next time we went back, the gun was gone. And we presumed the police had taken it.
We had to leave. We ran out of time.
So his prints were on it.
Fuck! I touched it.
You might cop a felony out the blue one of these days.
Well, it's on podcast now. This is a fact.
It was quite funny actually. The next door neighbours had asked earlier in the day if they could use the garden for a kids' party. So there was like the back garden was just full of these kids from next door. And the first question the police asked me, like, "Are there any children on the property?" And so looked out the window and it's like 50 kids. It's like, sorry, I may have made a mistake here. There's one question I've got to ask before we do the cockroaches.
Yeah.
So you said when you were in one of the prisons, you walked in and the walls were alive, and was it? Well, tell me about it. It sounds absolutely horrendous.
I never felt I would end up living in harmony with the cockroaches. They became my closest friends at one point in time. In the beginning, it didn't start out like that though. Like 8 at night. We would be locked down in maximum security, so all the prisoners go back to the cells, doors slammed shut. 10 o'clock is lights out, and this is an old building, and there's all these cracks in the cement block wall. And it's dark in the cell, but there's some little bit of light coming in from the day room. And you just see them like an army, just lining up in the cracks. And as soon as the lights went out, that was it, and then that was it. They would just flood the room.
Wow.
Yeah, like there was was it on MTV? Joe's Apartment? Anyone seen Joe's Apartment?
It
was like that. Literally swarms of cockroaches like that. Wow. I didn't think they even existed like that. And when I arrived at that cell, it was night time, and it was a 2-man cell. My cellmates are asleep on the top bunk, and I'm looking at the walls and thinking, are the walls moving? Or am I hallucinating? And when I put my face right up to the wall, and I could see them all just doing all this.
Crazy.
And I'm thinking, oh, how the hell am I going to sleep?
Wow. The worst thing I heard you say was, did you say earwax is like nectar to them?
What happens is, right?
Oh, man.
You're on the bed, and they're inches away from your face on the wall. And you can wrap the sheet around you to keep them off you, but you got all the bleeding and itching, skin infections and bed sores that the trapped heat of the desert makes it too itchy to sleep. I mean, it's so your skin's so messed up out there by the sweating constantly. If you want to scratch yourself because of the infections, but when you do, the clumps of skin just come off under your nails. So this heat makes that so bad. In the end, you're like, oh, you just throw the sheet off, and then they start out tickling your feet. Your legs, and you can feel them, you're falling asleep and then you're feeling them just coming onto your body, your hands, To this day, if anyone tickles my hands, I just flinch because I woke up so many nights with them tickling my hands. Wow. But the big one is when they get in your ears to eat your earwax. They try and get into the, it's like honey to them. My cellmate, he was thinking they were going to get stuck in there one of those nights. When he was stuck in, he was really paranoid. He would go to bed with a towel wrapped around his head.
How long would it take for that to become normality?
It took a while.
Yeah, I bet.
In the beginning, I couldn't sleep. With them crawling on me at all. I was too freaked out. And when you don't sleep night after night, you go into this strange mental state where you start hearing voices and seeing imaginary cockroaches.
Right.
So drops of water on the floor would look like cockroaches were coming at me. And in the end, I had to put a request into medical to get put on medication. I did get put on medication and I could sleep. You just take the medication, let them crawl on you. But the medication then fogged my brain up and had side effects. And then I started to get into meditation. I was already doing yoga, so I got into meditation. And the meditation eventually got me off the medication. And I just started to really observe the cockroaches and try and live in harmony with them. because you got to make the most of your environment, haven't you?
Yeah.
And I started to appreciate them. They have like little units. They'll be like a female one, a pregnant one, will have this thing like a piece of worm stuck to it with the eggs in it. And it'll try and find like a sneaky place where it can stick this thing to, where it'll hatch, where you won't find it.
Oh, wow.
And like sometimes they'd be on my books and stuff like that, but sometimes they'd be under the bunk and I wouldn't find them, and it'd hatch and it'd all be coming out onto my bunk. And there was white ones, like albino ones. There was little baby ones. And sometimes if I was pissed off at one and I was like telling it to go away, slapping my things down, I'm convinced it would tell the others through a chemical scent that it was in trouble.
Wow.
And warrior ones would come running from a distance
Wow.
to assist
Right.
it.
Wow.
Would come running from a distance to assist this one that thought it was in trouble. Honestly, this is the kind of things you get up to when you're locked in a maximum
Because
security.
it's like creating your own,
endless cockroaches.
creating your own nature documentary. Like, well, everyone likes watching nature documentaries, but you obviously had like, because even when you watch, like I've watched a full episode on ants, and when you are able to look at something that closely,
Insects
like,
are amazing.
yeah, it's fucking
Cockroaches
crazy.
are masters at faking their own deaths.
Really?
Seriously.
Yeah.
If you try and drown them, which I did in the beginning when I was mad at them, what they do is they shrink up into this deformed position that looks like they're actually drowned, like there's just they're over basically. But what they're doing is they're holding oxygen to themselves.
Oh, right, so they can carry on breathing. Wow.
So the sneaky little bastards are faking death while holding oxygen to themselves. And then when they get out of the water, they still look like they're dead for a bit. So you leave them alone, and then you go off somewhere else, and you come back. And they're gone! They're gone, they're resurrected when you weren't looking.
We did that with them. Me and Mark worked on a tobacco farm for a while, but the house was that shit that we lived in this barn. So we had to put a tent up in one of the rooms, and the house was just full of little mice everywhere.
Yeah.
And I remember Mark waking up one middle of the night just screaming at this mouse in the tent, and we whacked it with a shoe until it was dead, and then we put it outside the tent. In the morning, it was gone. That could have been a snake.
I hope it's
Still snake.
Yeah. I hope it did come round because otherwise something bigger ate it.
Yeah,
The cockroaches do a similar thing as well. You whack them, and they compress, they flatten, and then you think that's it, it's over. And they re-emerge.
Crazy.
But they spend the cleverness of it is that they spend a while in the dead locking position, so you don't mess with them. It's like when they like when they say if you fall in with like a lion pit or something like that, and just to fake that if they maul you and leaves you alone, just fake that it's killed you.
Yeah.
That's what they do. The cockroaches have the intelligence to do that.
Yeah.
And then once you left them alone,
They'll just pop back up.
they just pop back up.
But
Falling off roofs as well from great heights like that. They could be on that roof, fall off, and they just keep walking. doesn't faze them in the slightest.
And just one more question, in the same vein as Mark, is how did you know there was rat meat in the food?
Okay, there was dead rats in the food on
It was
occasion.
just dead rats in the food.
Full-
Just like a
full
full dead rat.
rat.
There was full dead rats more than once.
And like cooked or just
Boiled
thrown on
up
the food?
in the slop.
Did you eat the rest of the slop around the rat? Or
The prisoners ate all the slop, yeah. One time we gave a rat back to the guards, we actually complained, and they said they would investigate it, and they came back and said it was just a potato, so we couldn't sue the jail.
But the inmates cook, is that right? Are the people working
Right,
in
in
the
the
kitchen?
jail, there is a cooking facility with inmates in it, and then there's all this rotten, mouldy food that just gets donated to the jail. So that just gets all put in massive cauldrons, bags of potatoes, veg that's been
Wraps,
in
whatever's
cans from
in
the
there.
70s. All this stuff just gets thrown in, because I had a cellmate who had worked in the kitchen area. So as you can imagine, if you've got a sack of potatoes and a rat's got in it, that's how I'm trying to theorise that this has actually happened. I don't suspect that someone's just grabbed a rat and put it in and said, fuck the prisoners, we're going to poison them today. Yeah.
It's just crazy. I don't understand why it got to the point where they're just giving you mouldy bread and green.
Especially
green
when it's
because,
like you
know
said,
what I
it's
mean?
such a huge expense. Like that they make so much money from it that not even
100 million went missing in that jail, Sheriff Arpaio, that was budgeted for the prisoners. I think it was for food or something like that. Sheriff Joe Arpaio embodies tough on crime. So the harder he makes it, the more votes he gets.
Yeah.
And the less he spends on the prisoners, the more money he can share with his contractor buddies who are pilfering on the side.
And what's he doing now?
He gets re-elected every 4 years. They love him.
Because is he the sheriff of Arizona?
No,
or?
Maricopa County. It's basically in Phoenix and that surrounding area. If you're out doing publicity stunts all the time and saying you're tough on crime and criminals, the old generation vote for you, and that's where he gets his votes. Yeah. And the other thing is, all the other people who've run against him, the last guy who ran against him, I think he had $1 million in political contributions, and Sheriff Appy had $10 million. Just like the presidential election, whoever has the most money wins.
It's like Donald Trump. When everyone sees what he says, and everyone's just like, "This is a fucking joke. This guy's not going to get anywhere near power." I think I read something today that Bloomberg is looking at putting a third horse in the race, like as himself, because they're actually concerned that he might get something. Yeah. Because he's getting so much, like, from our perspective, we hear these things said and we're just like, what a fucking idiot. Like, how can that wash with anyone? But the scary thing is that there's so many people out there who it does wash with. And they speak to so many people. Like this, like you said, he's tough on crime. So these things that he's doing speak to far too many people. And the other scary thing is there's people that you'll speak to in everyday life who won't show these sides to themselves. But then when it comes to a voting box and they're in silence, then they'll kind of, they'll think that that's right, but they're not necessarily vocal that that's the way things should be.
And then money drives it at the end of the day, as usual. Yeah. And if you've got the most in contributions, I'll just give you an example of the racket of the prison, of the jail, the remand jail. So say, for example, National Geographic researched my Bank of Broad episode. They put a stat on the screen. 62 people died around the time I was in there. Mm-hmm. A lot of those were mentally ill prisoners, and a blind prisoner murdered by the guards. On camera.
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
Family members sued the jail, awarded compensation. And so these lawsuits come in. So there's tens and tens of millions, in lawsuits. And that money then, the sheriff, he assigns certain lawyers to represent the lawsuits who make millions in legal fees from the taxpayers. And then the lawyers turn around and contribute to his political contributions so he can get re-elected.
So the deaths are all part of his business.
Exactly. He's in the business of death. And guards that were found responsible for murdering the prisoners in federal court, he gave them promotions and pay rises afterwards.
It's crazy.
It just reminded me of something that I meant to say earlier where, like, you said a lot of the prison makeup was mentally ill.
Yeah,
people.
The biggest houser of the mentally ill in America is the prison system.
Now, this is something, like, I haven't spent that much time in America, about 8 weeks in total, I think. But one thing I noticed, particularly in New York, was the amount in Manhattan, was the amount of mentally ill people. Just because there's no sort of care system in place. Like in England, we catch people with mental illness quite early and we put a care system in place. Yeah. But that just doesn't happen in America. And
there's no welfare state.
Yeah, there's no welfare. And these people are wandering the streets, they're on the subway, and they're actually mentally ill. Like screaming and going crazy and things like that. And that doesn't surprise me, that these people, the only answer when they're 30s, 40s, and they're still in this position, they've had no care structure, they're like loose cannons, volatile people, and it doesn't surprise me that they make up majority of the prison.
Yeah, it was under the Kennedys. One Flew Over a Cuckoo's Nest came out. Yeah. It caused outrage at the treatment of the mentally ill in the mentally ill hospitals across America. Yeah. And they just closed them all down, and they ended up on the streets.
Right, that's the solution, isn't it?
Yeah, that's what they did.
It's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
I guess you better start wrapping
I
things
could
up.
Genuinely talk to you all day.
Honestly,
for sure. So interesting, enlightening, absolutely, crazy stuff. Your website, ShaunAttwood.com, is that the one you mainly drive sort of people to?
Or John's Jail Journal.
John's Jail Journal, the blog, and really looking forward to these videos coming out.
Yeah,
coming up.
Is anything else that you've got coming up other than the two
Tonys and the war on drugs?
Why is it called Two Tonys, by the way? Just because I wanted to ask that.
One of his mafia bosses was involved in the whacking of the two Tonys in LA. The original two Tonys were two strong arm guys who robbed the wrong people, robbed some mafia guys out of Vegas, I think. So a hit was put on them. And then two Tonys really looked up to his boss, but his boss was kind of using him a bit. But then after two Tonys rose up the ranks and was whacking people and had made a name for himself, his former boss tried to recruit him for something using the old routine where he'd meet him at this cafe and two Tonys shows up with his crime partner, the boss tells him what to do. And Two Tonys had been up all night on coke, and he was getting mad, and he was about to kill this former boss, and he really turned the tables on him, threatened him, and the boss, this guy Charlie Battaglia, backed down. So when Two Tonys was leaving with his crime partner Sal Spinelli turned around and said, "When you threatened him like that and he backed down, I could see the spirit of the Two Tonys at the table above you."
So he took me down.
Yeah.
When's that book out again, sorry?
Two Tonys has been submitted to my literary agent just now. He reads it, takes a few months, and then he submits it to the publishers, and that takes about up to a year as well, and then even another year after that before they can get it in the bookshops. About 2 years before it'll be in the bookshops.
Before that, you've got, 4 out at the moment? That people can
Yeah, my life
crack on
story's a
with?
trilogy. Party Time, Hard Time, and Prison Time. And then Life Lessons is just a book I wrote for school kids mostly, just the 10 most important lessons I learned in my life in the context of stories from my life.
Well, we'll put all the links and everything in
Cool,
the sort of
thanks.
base of this. But, mate, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
It's been fun. Yeah, thank you.
Cheers, mate.
Thanks a lot.
Cheers.